Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Richard Lewis Show. Obviously, you can see that my twin, according to the most loyal CS fans in the world, is joining me today. It is, of course, the beautiful, handsome, sexy Anders, stupid sexy Anders, as he's known collectively in the talent pool. And this podcast episode will also double up as a patron request from Zumba, who's one of my $100 patrons. He wanted to do a career retrospective with Anders in sort of the same way we did with Dignitas for another video. So we'll be talking about current events, but we are going to start off by Anders, talking about your incredible career in CSGO now that we've moved into the CS2 era. Lots of fond memories, I hope.
Yeah, lots of crazy memories. Yeah, it's like that's a game that it obviously took over my life, in a somewhat unexpected way. So lots of like probably more than I can even remember. Like this is actually becoming a problem now, where people sometimes come up to me and they'll say like, "Would you remember this thing?" And I'm like, actually, maybe not. Like it's it's like it's too far away now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been one hell of a wild ride for sure.
Well, I mean, look, I'll start by throwing this out, and I think I probably talked about this before, but yeah, basically, the first I remember when first time I met you was I think it was either 2011 Copenhagen Games or 2012.
I think it must have been
Um,
2012. Yeah.
yeah, and I think you'd brought your wife to the event,
Yeah.
and you came over to me. I was in the fucking press pool, probably like fucking drunk or coked out my mind, and as the job required at that time. And
Yes.
you said, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you. My name's Anders, fan of your work. I'm going to be a caster. I'm going to really go hard in CS:GO." And I'm gonna be the caster, for that. And I bought all this equipment. I'm gonna get the setup. And I think we had I think we talked for like an hour or two. We were talking for a long time. And it was like it was good to see somebody kind of come in the space with that verve and vigor to do a job. So I mean, like, just tell me about that. Like, what even goes through someone's mind to just like, oh, I know what I'll be in 2012, no less, a computer games commentator.
Oh man. I always try. I think I always try and steal like a Christopher Hitchens answer to this thing, because I like Hitchens too. Something about basically the idea that like boiling it all the way down, that you have to sort of feel like you can't really do anything else. Like it's not about like deciding this would be a cool job, maybe I can do it. Some feeling of saying like this is the only thing I really can even imagine doing. Like I can't
Mm.
imagine not doing it. And that was my experience the first time that I really like tried to cast Counter Strike. I just instantly knew, like I was in my final year of a bachelor's degree in English. Not that that actually means much of anything, but but in theory, I could have finished that degree, and done something for whatever student loans I was racking up, even in
Mm.
Denmark. So like, so I think, yeah, I just it just hit me like as soon as I knew the instant that I had done like was done doing the first day of casting from home at that point in time. Like I wasn't casting at that Copenhagen Games. I was just there
Yeah.
to check it out. But the first time I really tried it at home, like I knew I had already mentally like quit my university degree, and I kept like lying to my then girlfriend, now wife, like about it. It's like, yeah, no, I'll finish the different courses. I'll start writing the bachelor thesis in a minute now. But I knew like on day one, I was like, I'm out. I'm quitting this. I never stepped foot in the university ever again. Like I just literally didn't come back from then on. I didn't tell anyone either.
Why lying to your partner is good sometimes by Anders Blume.
There's going to be more of that happening throughout the story, I guarantee you. There's a knee incident somewhere that required some lying.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, but like that was it was just um it's really surreal. Like it's a really surreal experience having something where like I just love doing this. I love doing this beyond anything that I've tried.
Mm.
And obviously nobody's getting paid for anything. There was like that was not concept back then. Like it was just a Twitch channel and that was it.
Yeah.
I think the first actual event I did was, funnily enough, was something called Blast, but not the one that we know today.
It was the old Danish Blast brand,
Yes.
Blast.dk. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got paid 500 Danish kroner. And I slept on the floor with everyone else on like a tiny inflatable mattress.
Yeah, they
Like
used to do that as well.
it was sick.
I've been on those floors, brother. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was such a fantastic feeling. Like I really loved it. I was the first time that I saw Device play and Dupree. Like
Yeah.
there's somebody like I had no idea these people were from Source. They were just
Mm.
playing CS:GO, and I was like, okay, these guys seem cool. This is really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the first actual event that I did on LAN, you know.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think people sort of realize that, like, even I've done a few events as broadcast talent, live. Like, I used to be a commentator as well, which is, before I really went hard into the journalism around esports. And yeah, back in those days, I mean, and even further back, I'm talking 2008, 2007. You didn't get a hotel. I mean, if you were getting any money for your time, that was a miracle. But like accommodation was
Yeah.
very much on you. And if no one was making money on esports back in those days. So yeah, I've been there. I've been in the I Series Red Room, where Red Room is just a fucking room with a red light bulb, and it's just you in a fucking sleeping bag with a fucking 100 other smelly gamers.
Yeah.
But, it looks like a camp they set up after an emergency, like there's been an earthquake or a flood or something, and everyone's got to go to like somewhere. Um, and yeah, I used to do that shit too. And you know what? Fantastic adventures, fun.
Yes. Yeah, I love, obviously there's a weird thing that happens when you go from casting in your bedroom to casting at events to casting at events with really huge crowds,
Mm,
which is that you're like suddenly the big crowd moment is the only, like, you just want to re-experience that. Like, I'm sure the same thing happens to people who are like in a band or something. It's like, playing in a garage is fun, but as soon as you have a little bit of an audience, you can't you want to repeat that over and over again, I'm sure. And like the bigger the audience, that's like the new threshold for what's really fun.
mm.
But sometimes I do kind of, and now I kind of do enjoy, like, sometimes when we go back, like I think Henry and I at some point did like some online broadcast at the end of last year, and like the ability to read Twitch chat and all the madness that's going on there and like interacting with, I actually think it's really fun. Like, it's one of the things
Yeah.
that, sure, maybe we'll talk more about this, but I actually think we made a massive mistake at one point in esports, like diverting completely from like the Twitch chat thing. Like, yeah, sure, those people are crazy and it is wild, but they're like the most interactive audience you can probably get, right? And especially if you just talk a little bit to them every once in a while, like it's really interesting, and it's really crazy. And I don't know, like it was an attempt to, I think, professionalize things. Everyone was like, no, it's like it looks bad, and it does sometimes. Like there's no disagreeing, right? But on the other hand, like they are kind of the core fans in some sense. So I don't know, like that's yeah, I miss that a little bit sometimes, like going back to some of those moments. Because yeah, like the super professionalization of everything has other benefits and is fun in other ways, but like some of that is a little bit lost, and hope maybe it can be recovered. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Probably not. You know where I'm at mentally with it,
Sure. Yeah.
with the whole fucking esports thing right now. How did you get like headhunted and recruited by Nip? Because
Oh,
that's a part of your life that I think people always forget. But like,
sure.
for those that are new to CS, the Anderson Semler pairing was getting super popular, and ultimately Nip were the team. Obviously everyone knows about the Nip streak and all the legendary antics of those Swedes. They were one of the first professional with a big salary, and they were one
Yeah.
of the first orgs that really took CS:GO seriously. Everyone else was saying the game sucks, it's trash, and
Yeah.
we don't care. No one was getting salaries for it. Everyone quit. It wasn't until stickers got in the game that people got interested again. But obviously, you were the voice of Nip TV,
Yeah.
which is kind of like it doesn't really happen anymore. Certainly not in CS. That orgs have their own commentators, but you were the guy that did all the fucking Nip games, man. And it's
Yeah.
like, and other games on Nip TV's channel. So
Yeah.
tell me about why they picked you up, what the vision for that was, and how that changed how you approached commentary.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I think within the first 3 weeks or something of like me having made my own Twitch channel, which is called Pugcast for some random reason. Like I have
It's
pugs,
actually,
so
yeah, actually a really sick name though, because if you think about pugging as a sort of pickup game thing as
yeah,
well,
yeah, it
like,
makes
yeah,
sense in a
yeah,
different context too. It does, but yeah. So I just got an email in my inbox from Nicholas Fisker, saying from at nip.se or something like that, asking if I was interested in starting basically starting a channel under their brand, Nip TV or Nip Gaming TV. There's like different ideas for what the channel would be called, and I remember thinking this is this has to be a troll or a, like some attempt to scam. Like there's absolutely no way this could be happening really.
Right.
But I did kind of reply. Obviously, I said like, okay, let's have a call, and it turned out like, you can kind of tell and talk to people, if they're serious or not. So, and he said like, we'll fly you up here to Stockholm. We'll talk here if you want. We can do all that. And that sort of made it feel a lot more real to me. I remember thinking, okay, like if they're gonna fly me somewhere, it's probably not just for jokes, although that would be
Mhm.
funny. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, the vision, I think, was just to try to, I mean, from their point of view, probably was to try and sort of steal some part of the market, which I can appreciate. Like, that makes sense. And I think, from my point of view, I remember sort of telling them, I said, like, listen, I think one of what I'd really like is if you guys have existing sponsors, if we can find a way to get me paid for some of the stuff that I'm doing here, that would
Mm.
be unbelievably helpful, right? Because, at this point, again, like, I think I'm actually still getting student loans in spite of the fact that I'm not showing up for like the university. So I'm just racking up loans,
Mm.
and my girlfriend at the time, now wife, she is like working full time, like a miserable job, and she's like the only income that we have, right? So like I'm just talking to my computer maybe 12 hours a day or more, about Counter Strike. Because this people forget this cannot be done anymore. But at the beginning, um, first me and then later on Semler and I, we were covering like all the games that were in CS:GO. So we started at 6 in the evening, all the European
Yeah.
games until about 11. Then I would wait like 2 hours, and then about 1 a.m. European time, the American games would start, and then we'd cover all of those until about 6 in the morning. So literally, and then I'd go to sleep, and I would wake up and would do it again for like months on end. So,
I've literally
um,
never seen a caster duo pay their dues like that to that degree for as long as you guys did, actually. Like
it,
the hustle was insane.
I think this is again like to harken back to the Hitchens answer. Like the thing is, didn't feel that way, right? Like
Mm.
if someone told me to do it now, I wish I could say I could totally do it again, but I don't think I'd be able to. Like I think now it would feel like a real grind in a different way.
Mm.
And that's just, but at the time it just didn't. It felt super exciting, and it was in a. Imagine now, like no one can do this, but imagine literally knowing every single Counter Strike match that was. Like you watch all, no one could show up and say, did you see that game that was happening? And you'd be like, no, I did. I missed that performance. Like, no,
Yeah.
I saw everything. Like the only thing we didn't see were like people practicing each other, but every official game we were covering. Like, that's an insane position to be in, and it was so much fun. I don't think I thought of it like, yeah, obviously there was like the financial aspect was a bit scary. You're like
Mhm.
sort of saying, hopefully this works out, but but that didn't. Like, I just wanted
Yeah.
to do it. Like, I would have done anything to make that work, basically.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was like people I don't think understand. Like, I remember watching, obviously, and I'm the same. I was like a real junkie for fucking watching CS:GO games. I used to pride myself on, if there was some dog shit team, like that maybe we're gonna go into a qualifier. I liked being the guy who knew what their last five games were,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and who their best player was. I used to like being able to drop them little tidbits because obviously, if I ever got hired for analysis, then no one was ever going to take. I wasn't a pro player, so no one was ever going to take me seriously as an analytical mind. As I've said many times, I have literally like sat down with like a Sean Gares or an MSL or whoever it is and said like, what did you observe about this? I kind of felt it was like that. They tell me what they think. I go out and say it on a desk, and everyone calls me a moron. And say I
Sure.
don't know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
How it
So
is. Yeah.
yeah, people were never going to take me credible. So I like to just know things. I liked to know, what had been going on in the games. And every time I was doing my research, every time I was like, okay, yeah, this team that fucking the fifth best team in Peru were playing, and you would fucking turn on the it's Anderson Semler. Anderson Semler bringing you the Peru National at fucking 4 a.m. And I'm like, this is mental. You just did the European games in the afternoon, and I just couldn't believe it. Like the work ethic was like
S-
crazy.
Something that I wish I would have documented more back then is because it's really, really hard to recapture now. And I don't think anyone who said any of these things are going to like own up to it at this point. But
Mm.
so many people, like I was telling people, like, I think this CS:GO thing is going to be huge. Like I
Mm,
can't see a reason why not. Like I think this is like the game has like a ton of potential, and everyone was saying, like anyone who's working at DreamHack or anywhere else was saying there's no way, because esports is about RTS and MOBA games. Like that is what esports is. Those are
mm,
the big things. FPS is essentially not there unless you're in Korea where they were playing like Crossfire or something else. They basically were saying like it's not going to happen, like
yeah.
that, because it's just the wrong genre, right? And I remember thinking like this, I don't believe this. Like I don't believe it at all. Um, I don't accept that argument, and I was like, really like arguing with people about it. And I kind of wish I would have taken bets on that, or like done something to write it down, because it was, I think now it's hard to remember for people like what Counter-Strike had to fight against in a way, but
Mm.
like it wasn't obvious to anybody in esports as far as I can tell, at least from the people I talked to, and it was like a lot of people back then. Everyone basically said like, no, this, like, League of Legends and Dota or Heroes of New Earth or whatever it is, or StarCraft, like
Yeah.
those are the things that are going to make it, and the rest of it is, it's going to see like its high point within a year or two, and then it's going to drop off, and it'll be the end of
Didn't
it.
help that HLTV and notable 1.6 figureheads players were all
Sure.
like effectively lobbying for the game to fail because they
Yeah.
thought they could milk another 1 or 2 years out of 1.6.
Yeah.
And
That's
that really didn't fucking help us out at that time. I even tweeted, dude. There's a tweet. Everyone links it. Well, the old heads link it to say Richard Lewis has been retiring for as long as I've known him. Because I said like
sure.
I think it's time to accept that maybe CS:GO isn't going to be the game we all want it to be, and so I'm going to focus my coverage on exactly as you said, League of Legends and StarCraft,
Yeah.
and that's what I went and did.
Yeah, and I mean, and obviously the first like 2012, early 2013 CS:GO really was pretty miserable in a lot of ways, right?
Mm.
It took a minute for it to catch up. And yeah, like the terrible division, like the 1.6 versus Source versus Go situation, which I definitely participated in on the 1.6 side. But again, like I was kind of a kid, so I guess like it was just
Yeah,
cool to be part of the cool kids club, you know.
yeah.
Um, I I regret that since, like I feel like it would have been so much cooler for me. Like my experience in Go would have been richer if I would have known who Shocks and RPK were like
Yeah,
before. Like it would
absolutely.
have been way more fun for me personally. So I wish I hadn't, been playing the team, thing, and I just kind of
And
enjoyed whatever I
and that
enjoyed,
was the crazy thing, man. Like fucking all of the source heads all watched 1.6.
Yeah.
We all watched 1.6. Like I knew every 1.6 player, but I would talk to 1.6 fans, and like you say, they didn't know who the fuck RPK was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They
What a
didn't know.
shame.
Yeah, they didn't know about existence and the great journey he went on, or NBK, going on to become the fucking kingmaker. Started out as a teenage AWPer.
Yeah, yeah.
They don't know about this shit. They weren't there. They never saw Guardian in his absolute prime years.
Yeah.
And everybody when and again, these people have gone on to become iconic CS:GO
Yes.
players.
Yeah.
And it's like you could have been there at the start. All you had to do was not catch feelings over a fucking video game,
I
you
know.
fucking weirdo.
It's what a bizarre scenario to have two communities who both essentially love Counter-Strike, right? They
Yeah.
just love slightly different iterations of it, and then that's enough to just make people go completely ballistic, you know.
Yeah.
But just, I mean, actually, you said like 1.6 figure people. This is probably worth, sort of, to answer the whole NIP TV question as well. It was a really surreal experience for me, like landing in Stockholm and going to, like, we had like a little studio in like a little suburb of Stockholm, that was run by this, one of the NIP guys, and NIP were playing from there. Like I
Mm.
was doing a broadcast right next to the NIP team with, Get Right and Forest, especially for me, and Exist, were like, I think of them as like like the childhood like heroes in a way. Like I watched them in, in 1.6 and probably even earlier than that. Like for me, it was really surreal, and I was just like a random person who's coming in to, so that was a wild, super wild experience. But and the most insane thing was that first day we were doing a broadcast was the first game that NIP lost online to one of the Russian teams, I think. Hell was it? Maybe Hellraiser was too early. Maybe it was like one of the early Navi iterations with Markolov or something. Anyway, they lost to that team, and it was like that hadn't happened before. And I was in the studio with them obviously cheering on Navi winning. I was like, this is super insane. Like, no
Mhm.
one's beaten Nip on this map or whatever it was. Like, and the guys were like literally right off to the side. But something that really struck me about those people, like, they were so welcoming. Like, in a way, they could
Yeah.
have been like, why do we have to play from a studio to help this guy build Nip TV? Like, we don't even know who this
Mm.
person is. Like, we're professional players, right? Like, why are we somewhere, like, they probably want to play from home, right? But they were so
Sure.
friendly and well, like, it was such an insane experience because, again, they really had no reason to, like, be welcoming, but they were just like, that really, I mean, to this day, like, those are people I just love running into them. It's more rare now for some of them than I want. Like, it's been a real long time since I've seen Fiflaren, but what an amazing, human being.
People never got that about that Nip team. I don't think. I don't think people realize they were the they were the Beatles of fucking Counter
Yeah,
Strike at that moment in time. If Get Right and Forest and Exist don't come across to play CS:GO, we've got a huge and then we would have had a huge legitimacy problem as a game.
yep,
So not only did they legitimize the whole game, they were getting paid the highest salary in the world at the time, which incredibly was like €1,000 a
sure,
month,
yes,
which is insane again to think about. They brought in a ton of sponsorships, a lot of it Swedish, but some of it had wider reaching ramifications, like the
yeah,
McDonald's Sweden
yeah,
sponsorship. They were iconic players in their own right from their respective disciplines. Fiflaren was a star player in CGS. Freiburg was one of the biggest players in Sweden. Exist, Get Right, Forest, it all had these like tenured careers. Obviously, the classic duo, Forest and Get Right, more so than Exist, respectfully.
yeah,
But they were humble, model professionals across the board. They complied with every single media request.
yeah,
Quite famously, that documentary, which I genuinely believe cost them the major in at DreamHack,
yeah. That was rough.
um, because they were doing too much and the scrutiny was too much, and the cameraman was in their face while they were trying to play, and all this like fucked up shit.
Yeah,
The boundaries were not respected, let's say. But I never saw them act like a diva. And then I just think about modern players now and then I compare them to like how they behave and their attitude to media work and their attitude to journalists and their attitude to broadcast talent. And it's like, guys, you don't even know you're standing on the shoulders of giants. Like that they like the NIP players literally paved the way for you to have the career you have. And you would do well to be inspired by them, not just in gameplay terms, but in terms of attitude. They are kings among men. No, for real.
yeah. It was a really, like, it really was a really humbling experience. To be around those people, and yeah, like, and it's really, I think it's really worth highlighting. Like, they did it for, like, they weren't becoming millionaires on the back of this stuff, right? In
No.
many ways, they were being treated in some crazy scenarios. Like you said, the work that they had to put in was insane. Very often under, like, absolutely less than, like, if you compare it to like a modern day, so like practice room or anything else like that, like those early days, it was misery all around, basically.
Yeah.
um and that's just how it was, right? So yeah, I agree. Like, I think there's definitely something to be said for trying to remember what those people had to build. And again, like, that was true for NIP, but you think about a team like French Very Games, right? Who had like none of the support that NIP had in that sense, right? But still were
Mm.
like putting together a lot of really crazy. So one of the only teams really that could like fight NIP reasonably back then. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, that was a wild journey, and like it taught me a bunch of things. Also, because later on, when we sort of decided to split from the NIP thing, and sort of like, I could sort of see the writing on the wall that, for as cool as this was, it also felt like being locked into like a very specific thing, right? And it's
Yeah.
like that also became, I think, a danger at some point. So like having to go through that, having to sort of go to NIP and say, hey, we appreciate all the help and all the, like, everything, but also we want to start our own thing, and we kind of want your blessing for it. Like, we want to work this out in a reasonable fashion, all the rest of it. That was super hard to do, right? Like, I'm not a business person. I don't know how to negotiate any of this stuff. Like, it's super hard to do that. And
Hmm.
that was interesting and probably worthwhile experience to have at the beginning of everything.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that you went from that, but at the same time you're being adjacent to like, Counter-Strike royalty, and having this opportunity to be like, the voice of Nip. One of the early disappointments in your career, which I was very vocal about at the time, was obviously DreamHack in Sweden didn't want to use you and Semler together on the main stage. And it seemed internally they felt you weren't good enough or polished enough. And then I look at some of the hiring decisions and pairings that they had, caster pairings at that major,
Sure.
including like, again, no disrespect to him, but like Lurpis got to cast and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I was casting with Lopez. That
Yeah, yeah,
was new experience.
yeah, yeah. And it's like I it's one of the most stupefying decisions. Like it made me wonder who was in charge of like talent over there to like not be able to listen to you and Semler and realize like how good you are and how like people are ready for that, like, and then you go out and you hire a bunch of like weird legacy hires that like don't have a lot of broadcast experience, like BSL. Again, Jonas is like a personal hero of mine. He's like an award-winning journalist in real life, not just a
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
1.6 legend,
A
so
friendly
I
guy too. Yeah.
love that man.
Yeah.
But like um he was a little bit lost on the broadcast. I think the occasion kind of overawed him a little bit. And it's like, meanwhile, they were telling me, who went on to become their de facto host every time there was a game DreamHack wanted to
Yeah.
run. They were telling, they said at that time, we just don't think you'll be good enough on camera. Like, it's like,
I
you know,
think there's so many. I remember there's so many crazy rumors happening at the time. Like I was I was like balancing a lot of things. I remember some of the events that Semler and I weren't invited to, or that it was rumored that maybe one or both of us weren't going to be invited to. I remember like the urge to try and complain about it in public is really overwhelming, right? Because
mm,
you kind of know that maybe it can work if you go on Twitter and you say like, oh, I wanted to go, but I'm not invited. Like it's terrible. But there was some part of me that also felt probably this is also bad. Like it's probably not a good idea to do this. Like if you don't get hired, just try and stay professional about it and try not to complain about it on any level. So that was like something that I just intuited early on. It's like it's not a good thing to complain in public too much about things. Like you can find a way to say I hope to improve enough that I can do it. But next time, even if you thought you already deserved it or whatever the case may be, but just try and word it in a reasonable way. But then the other thing that was in the background was all these rumors of really huge talent that was going to come in. I remember people saying Toby One from Dota was maybe going to come cast. I thought,
yeah, dude. I remember that.
yeah, I thought Red Eye and Joe Miller was going to come cast, right? So I
That
never,
too.
I didn't grow up listening to a ton of Red Eye, but for me, Joe Miller was like the 1.6 Counter-Strike caster. Like that's like
Yep.
his voice is kind of like what I remember listening to a lot, right? I know most people probably associate Joe Miller with League of Legends now, but for
hmm
me, it was Counter Strike, right?
It's
So
one
the
of the high points in my career that I got to cast with him.
yeah, super. So I did as well in Go early on, like, and it meant a lot to me. It really did. Like, I think it was
Yeah.
really cool. So but having that in the back of your mind, thinking, wow, like, what are we supposed to do? These people have like actual established names, like people know who they are. They have like Twitter follow. I thought that meant a lot back then. I was like, oh my god, they have 50,000 people on Twitter, and I have like 1,000. What's like, of course, they're never gonna hire me. That kind of thing. But like all of those things were like all melting together in some crazy. Like there was just that's like a in itself a mental place to be. Like you're loving your job, but you don't know about like the future. You have no idea. You're not getting paid for anything yet. Like at the end of 13, it's not worth even talking about. So just like that's a giant melting pot of all kinds of things. But yeah, I also think to some extent Semler was like seen as like the kind of flunky from the good studio, right? Like he was like
They did him so dirty, man. Like
yeah,
for
like he was,
real.
I think, treated maybe more roughly than people kind of realize.
Mm.
And he had been like his big home. I think it was something called was it called like Blood something? It was like another one of these like Hon kind of rip-offs.
Oh yeah, yeah, fucking not Battle Bit. That's the FPS. But yeah, and it disgusts me that I can't remember it. But yeah,
Yeah, I feel the same way.
yeah, it was like a 2v2 super
Yes.
fast MOBA things made by Stunlock Studios.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. People
you
can Google it, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. I'm literally gonna get the name because it's gonna bother me. But yeah, keep talking.
but yeah, like he was on that game and was kind of like on top of it, and I think really loved it. Like genuinely really enjoyed the game, right? And it just died. It just the scene just evaporated in front of him, right? So he like needed a new place to be. But I think, and he was like, I was discovering esports randomly, but Semler was in it before I was. Like he had moved to
Mm.
Sweden to do the good studio thing. Like he
Yeah.
was in it. He knew everybody. Like when we went to the first DreamHack together, like Semler was like shaking hands with left and right with people. Right? I don't know anyone. I was like, oh, what's up, guys? So I think maybe the existing esports space just also had a hard time accepting Semler as like someone who was now, they should have been working with. I think maybe that was
Mm.
also hard for people to accept that, like, oh shit, like he's actually carved out a place for himself here, and we have to hire him in some sense. Like I think that was hard for people to
It was
accept.
Bloodline Champions, and they made a
Yes,
sequel, which was the same genre, Battle Right. That's what we were doing
there
there.
we go.
Boomer brain in
We
real
fixed
time.
it. We did
But
it.
yeah, no, I mean, I talked about it a lot. Like, I was actually really glad that Samla got the break. Of finding you as a partner because like unbeknownst to a lot of people, I actually went and stayed at the Good Studio.
Yeah.
I was very friendly with a lot of people at DreamHack. There was kind of a weird thing happening in the talent world at that time. And it was like we were getting like divided into there was kind of like the bad boys of the talent pool.
Sure.
And I was only just entering into the talent pool. I was still very much a journalist at this time. But there was like the bad boys of the talent pool. And then there was the fucking tyrants and the people that were essentially bullying TOs and holding them hostage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so DreamHack had gone through this whole thing with like fucking Day Nine and all of his diva bullshit and insisting that
Sure.
the
Yeah.
StarCraft stage was called the Day Nine stage and all this stuff. Uh,
Although that is based as fuck. Like imagine.
I mean, imagine you turning around and going, "I want the CS:GO stage to be called the fucking Anders stage."
Yeah.
Imagine ever pulling that
That's
card,
sick.
but whatever. I mean, listen, if you can do it, I suppose like it's kind of cool in a way, but it's also disgusting in another way. Whatever. But
Yeah.
anyway, so all that was going on, and DreamHack decided they were going to fund their own like talent studio essentially. And I was friends with the people at DreamHack, and they said, "Listen, why don't you go and stay there?" And your friends were too good, right? And I went, "Yeah, yeah, known him since CGS." First time I ever did on camera work for a tournament operator was I sort of I took over a job from Too Good. Like he didn't want to do it, or they thought he wasn't getting takes out quick enough. Choose your version. And they put me in. So I went there and it was like nothing I've ever seen. It was like
Yeah.
really fucking strange. It was a strange environment,
Yep.
and Too Good had an entourage, which I'd never seen an esports talent person have
Sure.
a
Yeah.
fucking entourage. There were people at the house all the time. Like James was saying to me, like, "I'm super looking forward to seeing you." And I went, "Oh yeah, it's gonna be cool to hang out again. I haven't hung out since CGS. Got there, the house was just locked when I arrived. They knew I was arriving, and I was stood outside. And I was like, are you gonna let me in?" Anyway, then Tuka turned up in a car with like an entourage of people I didn't know. And he was like, "Oh, hey, Rich, yeah, I forgot that you were coming to stay." They let me in. I barely spoke to James the entire time. He was just partying, hanging out, or doing
Yeah.
shows. And they obviously I was a journalist, an observer, friend. They weren't putting me on the broadcast, and obviously it was cameras everywhere. So I was
Yeah.
just sort of off to the side, kind of watching it all. Um, and I was watching them, and the shit they used to give Samler, like,
Yeah. He was like the sort of the clown of the whole thing in some sense. Like
yeah, and
it was a
yet
bit rough.
the nicest, sweetest guy. Like
Yeah.
me and him. This is how I got to know Samler. He was the guy, like the guy I didn't know was the guy who took the time to sort of hang out, make me feel comfortable. And the whole point of the exercise was, I think they were nudging me towards it'd be cool if you did a wicked content piece around a good studio and how we're gonna, be a game changer in the space, which by the way, totally they would have been. It was just they were way too ahead of their time. It was too much money and not
Yeah.
enough
Yeah. Yeah.
engagement
That's
and no
true.
revenue stream. If we had that now, it would be mega, it would be amazing. It'd be like Barstool, but for
Yes.
esports. But anyway, but Samler was the guy who spent every night like, "Oh, hey, want to get a beer, want to hang out, want to do stuff." And I was, and then he'd spent his entire day, getting wrecked on a broadcast or on a broadcast he wasn't even on
Sure, yeah.
too good going into these monologues. I sound just like an asshole. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, this is such a bizarre dynamic, and yet they all live together. So yeah, I was super happy because I always thought Semler did get a bit done a bit dirty by the good studio dynamic. And he was a mega talented guy. Like that just was being represented as a joke when he wasn't, you know?
And he, I mean, like for his side of the story, right, like he literally moved from LA to
Yeah.
Sweden on a mission to pursue esports, which is so crazy. Like it's such a crazy thing to do in its own right. He's still in Sweden now. Like it's he's still there. Yeah, I slept in the good studio once as well.
Mm.
I had a very sort of like similar surreal, sort of like what's going on here. But I agree, like in a way, like as a concept, yeah, like James was just way ahead of his time, and that's which is fun to think about. Someone should try it again, but maybe less crazy.
Yeah. So when did in your career, when did you realize you had made it and could stop lying to your wife?
Stop lying. I mean, there was some at some point, definitely in terms of like just making enough money so that the whole thing kind of paid off itself. Like it was like
Right.
no longer red numbers at the end of every month. It was like, oh, there's something happening now. One of the big problems at the point in time is like I don't know anything about taxes or anything. So like I'm making money, but I'm not paying any taxes or anything. So I'm going through like that experience. That wasn't fun the first time the tax department called me and said, hey, you've made money. Like how you have to pay us this much. I'm like, oh, that's a surprise.
You've been using
Um,
Flush as accountant.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, that was really wild. But I I think I actually don't know if I ever really have had like the moment of saying like I've really really made it. Like I think people are just constituted like mentally super differently. Like I'm always on edge about the idea of giving myself like too much credit for anything. Like, and it makes me nervous when people come up and say like, "Oh, like you're a legend of this space and like you're doing such a good job." Like, it just there's something about it that puts me that makes me uneasy because it makes
Mm.
me feel like I'm about to enter into a space where like I'm gonna be super lazy and super like it's just all gonna kind of like like fall apart. Because I can be like a super lazy person in the wrong context, I think. So I'm always like on edge about that stuff. And I think in general also because all the work is like freelance work, so I generally have no idea even to this day like what I'm doing in like 3 months basically, or maybe even sometimes like a month.
Yeah.
Um, so as a result, it's like it feels like the ride is like going, but only for a while, and then like you don't really know what's happening next to it, which is sometimes completely terrible from like I think from like a human being perspective is actually insane, and I would argue that there's like a potential mental health bomb underneath all of esports that's just kind of waiting to explode.
Oh, sure, sure.
But in another way, like it has some benefits in the sense that like it does make you kind of want to keep fighting to like prove that you're doing a good job and all the rest of it. So I don't know if I actually ever had like the moment of saying like, but I mean, I think if the closest probably I would think I'd have is I think that first Cologne event that we did with
Okay.
like the 12,000 people. I think being in a stadium with that many people probably was one of those things where I was like,
That's
oh,
2015, right?
2015. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's probably at the point in time where I was thinking like, okay, like this is so surreal. Like this is so like it's one of those things like you go to bed at night, just like if you've been to a concert and you can still hear like everything, like
Mm.
that kind of feeling. Like that was really wild.
Yeah. I mean, that was a great event as well. Great
Yes.
crowd, great venue. And that was when we were really taking off. And you and Semler had kind of positioned yourself. Again, this always gets you into trouble when you say it, but I think you'd positioned yourself at that point, through hard work and talent as being the, number one,
Sure. Yes.
cast the duo. Everyone hates this. It fucking bores me to tears that like our colleagues, don't really get that like when you brand someone the de facto commentary group or duo or individual or whatever it is, it's not really a reflection of like your work rate or your ability. We're really talking about something else. There's like this magical formula of like you know uh ability, presence, recognizability, popularity, and it all sort of comes together and you go, yeah, of course you got to have them there.
Yeah.
And that's all we're really talking about. Like, people get so fucking upset about that label, and then when it's them who get to wear it, all of a sudden it's out. Yeah, we are the number one duo. You fucking rejected this as a idea just 6 months ago when it wasn't you.
Yeah.
I hate all that bullshit, but ultimately, I think just real talk. At any moment in time, as a fan, there is a voice or voices you want to hear at the game. You want to hear them call it, and that was definitely true of you guys at that moment in time. What's that like being the voice of a game?
Um, I think I somebody I can't remember. I think it was on esports. Somebody wrote that article like fairly early on, sort of saying like, and his Anders like the voice of Counter Strike or something like
Mm,
that. And for some reason, that headline just stuck so hard. Like that
mm,
became like the reference point for a bunch of things. Um, and I again like I want to reject those things because it makes me feel uncomfortable in a way
sure.
that I can't really sort of explain. But I will say now I am actually trying to embrace it a little bit more. Um, and one of the reasons is I have this recurring experience whenever some of the big events come around, like Katowice or Cologne or some of these other things. I have people who write me and they say, like quite a few people, and they say something like, hey, I've been watching Counter Strike for 10 years, and this is the first time that I'm an adult now, which in itself is mind blowing to me. I forget that if someone who's 22, that means they were watching since they were like 12 years old, right? So they were
Mm,
watching some of those early events when they were like 12 or 13, and they were just kind of kids and, begging their parents to go to Cologne or something. And they said, like, there's absolutely no way we're doing that. But now they have their own budget and they can do it.
yeah,
And they say, I want to go have like the Counter Strike experience, and part of that for the people who write me at any rate means they kind of want to hear my voice, and they will often sort of include Semler in that. They'll say like, "Oh, we want to, it'd be cool to hear you and Semler come back and do this," because it's like a childhood thing for those people, right?
yeah,
That for me, like when I read enough of those messages, it kind of made me think, okay, there's actually something to this, like because I know what that is like myself. Like I recognize what it's like when I listen to StarCraft now, like if it isn't Tasteless and Artos is doing it, there's something where I'm like, oh, it kind of doesn't feel quite like StarCraft, does it? Um, so I kind of recognize that, and I think it's something that I am trying to claim a little bit myself to sort of say, all right, like I should probably just say, you know what, like actually, yeah, put in like a ton of work, but again, like without trying to, I'm trying not to like make it too crazy either. Because I think one of the just to say a little bit for the people I work with, I think one of the unique things about Counter Strike is how many insanely talented people we ended up having and still have at the top level. But something I wanted to follow up on this too. This thing about going from kind of nothing on Nip Gaming TV and all the rest of it to then being in front of like a huge crowd, and Semler and I really the number one duo.
mm,
And then at some point, like Henry and Sadekist are coming up as like
mm.
as a follow-up duo. I remember like the exact event that Semler and I skipped on, the X Games event.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, MLG
yeah,
X Games or whatever the fuck. Yeah.
yep. And I remember even at the time, it was in the back of my mind thinking, you know what? It, because I think we were invited to that event and we just said no for whatever reason. Like it was, you know, didn't fit with the calendar. We're doing too many other things, or we're doing some other event. But anyway,
Mm,
I remember thinking, man, us saying no to this is definitely allowing these two guys to get to get a chance to actually prove themselves, and
mm,
that's kind of scary. Like that's competition, right? Like there are other people. That's how I thought about it, and they proved themselves. Like they were really good, right? Like it was
yeah.
evident, I think, fairly early on. I also did do some ESC events early on, but Sadekis was there as well, but he was much more of like I think even in the ESCA kind of world, like like a third guy that they had sort of around. But yeah, like that was like their big breakthrough moment. And then you got like the emotional feeling of going through a stage where you're like the undefeated number one. Like literally nobody can host a Counter-Strike tournament of any size without inviting you. Like they
Mm,
just can't do it. And then suddenly you start to see, oh, they're gaining in popularity. And then there's some inflection point there where now you're not the number ones anymore. Like
yeah.
they beat you to it, and they did.
Hmm.
And remember I had like a bunch of conflicting emotions at that point in time. Like one, that's a completely new experience, right? Like now you're not the community favorites anymore. Like, holy shit,
Yeah,
right? And you
yeah.
realize you took all of it for granted, right? You didn't even enjoy it when it was happening. You said like, of course we're sick. Like, what, you don't even, you only notice afterwards when people are now saying, yeah, Samurai Night is all right, but I actually think Sericus and Henry are even better, right? Like, you're like, what's going on here, you know? So
Yeah.
that's the one side. But I also I recognize something else that was super important for me to hold on to, which is that Counter Strike as a game just cannot make it if there's only like one casting duo that has to do all the tournaments. Like, if that was true,
Yeah.
then the game is kind of fucked. Like, there's no way this can be like if it's ever going to be bigger than this, it cannot be gate kept by like two people who are like doing everything night and
Yeah.
day, right?
Yeah.
So there was some sense of relief for me too, being able to have like Matt and Henry show up and then do an amazing job and kind of um like take care of the game when we weren't when we weren't invited, or it wasn't us doing the finals, whatever it was. Like, that actually was a really cool experience because it made me think like, okay, like
Hmm.
I can safely let this go to somebody else, and they're not going to screw it up. They're going to do like a really cool job. The fans will love it. Like, more people will come in and say this is really cool. Like, that was a really interesting moment for me.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, like, nobody prepares you for what that's like. Like,
Yeah.
all of the good stuff about being on top of the world when you're rising as a Counter Strike caster or any caster in any esports, like, you you don't notice how cool it is until you get right on the other side, and then you realize, oh wow, like, I didn't, all that time with the community were cheering me on and doing all that. Like, I didn't even think about it. Like, it was just a thing. So that's a really, that took me many years, I think, to sort of settle all that and really think about it and really realize what had even happened.
Mm.
So yeah, crazy time for sure. But also, like I think just a part of like a long learning experience, that like, I'm definitely not sad about now, on any level.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about like the later stages. Obviously, E League, they all loved you, and Samla, and you were for a long time, our go-to guys, and then I won't bore everyone with the fucking politics and what else was going on in the back room. Um, but ultimately, I think that for me is always going to be in many ways like the high watermark of my career in broadcasting, but also just one of the career highs for me in general.
Yes.
Like the Boston major is kind of like, if I could go back to it's morbid to frame it like this, right? So I apologize to everyone. But when Walter White in Breaking Bad says, I went past it, the perfect moment where if I died, I would have had everything, right? Like I
Sure.
know that
Yes.
the perfect moment was at the end of the Boston Major.
Yeah.
I'm in a room for politics and egos were starting to creep into talent work, but they weren't overbearing at that point. All the crew are crying. We've had a great job. Cloud9 have won. It's like the miracle in Boston.
Unbelievable.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, the crowd are all satisfied. We've just broken a viewership record on top of everything else. The TV network is calling us up, telling us we've done a phenomenal job. And then we've got the wonderful city of Boston to have a night out in,
Yeah.
where I got to drink with Carrigan. Uh, and I was going, I was flying back to my fucking Vegas house. And life was just great. It
Yeah.
was it was just perfect. And it's like that's the moment for me right then. So
Yes.
what do you have a moment like that? Does it relate to E-League?
Yeah. E League was, fully agree, it was a very, very, very special place. Also because of what Turner kind of was as an organization. I actually emailed Ben Spitalik not that long ago just to say hi, just to like,
Miss Ben so
yeah,
much.
just an absolutely amazing human being. Like, you knew if you were in Atlanta again, like, you could always send him a text and say, hey Ben, like, do you want to meet somewhere? Um, yeah, like, people throw around the whole the like, this company's like a family kind of thing, like, a lot, but like, for
Yeah.
some of those people, like, that was really, in a way, like, that was the skill of Turner, was finding those people, I think, and really like empowering them and really making it cool. And that I think is also that's why the broadcast was so insane. Like in a lot of ways, like it was everybody. Like that was the first time that I saw everyone on the broadcast feel like they were part of the show, like from the camera crew to the showrunners. Like
Mm,
nobody was just like a weird accessory to the show. Like literally everyone understood that like as a whole team, we're all coming together to make this. It doesn't really matter who's in front of the camera or who's in the control room or who's doing something else. Like everyone has to make this like a really cool thing. Like that was
yeah.
really, really sick. And like anyone that can, if anyone in the future can replicate that in esports somewhere, like that would make a difference, like for sure. It's super hard to do. Like it's like a work culture thing that's like very hard to do, but they absolutely did that. And it was super rare. So yeah, I think that was I definitely had a moment with E League that taught me something really important. I don't think I've actually ever told this story, but around the time of the first E League major in Atlanta, we were um in that theater.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, the Fox did, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I had a thing that was mentally like absolutely wrecking me at that point in time.
Yeah.
And it was because this what was happening again, like the backdrop that I just explained, where like Sadekist and Henry are like massively on the rise, probably at that point catching up to us. Dan and Battle for out there also doing great work. Like there's real competition now. It's not
Mm.
just Semler and I just are riding the waves and just having a great time. Like people are really saying like there are other people we really love, right? And rightfully so. But Semler and I together had like a string of events where we had run into this mental pattern that was literally like ruining my life at this point in time. um, we basically so if you have three casting duos at an event, you have your four quarterfinals, you have two semifinals, and one grand final. So how do you solve that puzzle? How do you get
Yeah.
that treated fairly? Generally, what you do is you would say whatever crew is doing the final, they get to do two of the worst quarterfinals, and then
Yeah.
none of the semifinals. Like you skip the semifinal, but then you get to do the grand final,
Yeah.
which is objectively seems like a great solution, right?
Mm.
But here's the problem: Semler and I ended up like a whole. I wish I could go back. I swear we casted like five or six, maybe more events in a row, where every single quarterfinals we did, it was never going to be more than like 16-6 or 16-7 at the most. Like it was all we got all the one-sided quarterfinals, and all the finals were terrible, like beyond like salvaging almost. Like it was and it was in the beginning. It's fine, like you don't really mind. You're like it doesn't matter. Like it's just it's the luck of the dice or whatever. Like you can't control it, but once it happens enough and you notice it, this is the thing that I really learned. Like once I noticed that this was happening, it was it was so hard to deal with. Like the
Yeah.
feeling of like I want to be able to do a really great job with a really fun game, but I'm getting like the games that are just like it was like Liquid with Simple and Hiko playing
Mm.
like somebody else and just getting destroyed in the grand final. And I just remember thinking like it's so hard. Like yes, as a professional, I am part of my worth, and it's actually something Semler said at one point. Like we have to remember that like from a tournament point of view, a game that's like a 4 out of 10, if we do a really great job and we can elevate it to like a 7 out of 10, that like we're it's so valuable what we're doing to the overall experience for the
Sure,
fans
yeah.
and the product. And
Yeah.
I recognize that, but on some ego level, you want to be able to cast like really sick games, right? That
Of
are like objectively like really fun that go into overtime, and we just had none of that. But even worse, because you're doing all the grand finals, it's sort of in the eyes of the community, it looks like you're like hogging all the space for yourself, right? Like why can't Dan and James do it? Why can't Sadekist and Henry do it? Like what's going on? Like why is it always Anders and Semler? And
Mm.
I felt that like really hard because like then you're being pressured from two sides. Like your
Yeah.
own brain is kind of like fucking with you, and you're getting all the community feedback from it. I actually went to E League for that major, and I said to them, I really don't want to do the grand final here. I just don't want to be in this position again. I don't want to I've had enough of this experience. Let somebody else do it. I'm not in like I can't deal with it any longer. Like it's really messing me up. Um and they kind of and I was like super emotional about it. Like I really was.
Oh no, I remember.
Yeah, like I think I was like crying in the street outside at one point, and I think Ben and some of the other people kind of came out and talked to me, um and obviously that final turned out to be insane, right? Like
Yeah.
that was the one. So
One
in
of the great one of the greatest, if not
yeah,
the greatest.
Yeah, the one where Astralis like turn it around on train to like
Yeah.
it's just like I actually wonder what would have happened if I had successfully talked myself out of doing that final. Like I wonder if that would have just completely destroyed me, right? Because it would have like, it would have been so. But anyway, it taught me a bunch of interesting things, right? Like for one thing, no one can really control if you're going to do the fun games or not, right? Like so I had to really stop thinking about it because I was messing myself. I was doing it to myself, right? So I had to stop thinking about that. Um, and I had to do and something else that was important to me throughout all of this. That's been actually been very very hard for me to really get this message across because I don't think people believe it or they don't trust it or whatever. But Semler and I never negotiated to do any finals ever. Like explicitly, we didn't do it because
Mm.
I knew that this had happened in StarCraft. Like there was a bit of a monopoly situation at one point in StarCraft where you know, as a if you were like the third or fourth best commentator or something in StarCraft, you might go to an event knowing you will never do the grand final. It is never going to happen. And I thought that's really bad. Like that is a bad environment. Everyone should be able to go to any tournament and have the best cast of their week or their month or whatever. And the tournament organizer should be able to say, wow, these guys are amazing right now. Like today, they are amazing. We're going to let them do the final. And that's all,
Mm.
that's the only thing that matters. Um, and that was like a thing that it was so Scoots, funnily enough, that said this to me like really early on. He said just like a TV concept, show is king, right? You sacrifice
Always.
everything you can to make the show as good as it can be. And if that means that Anders and Semler as like the number one people are not going to do the final, then that's it. Like you don't have to think about it as like a personal insult. You just have to think, no, we're doing whatever we can to make the best show. And maybe that's you, but maybe next week it's not. And that's that kind of mentality just spoke really hard to me.
A lot of people in this business don't get it, brother. And, people can say whatever the fuck they want about me. And they do. I'm sure you've noticed.
Cool.
But
I see it.
that was my mindset every single time. I woke up and I did not care about how much shit I was catching on social media or what was going on in my personal life or minute I walked in any studio anywhere in the world, that shit went away. It was smiles, you know, we were all in it together. I'm talking to the fucking crew. I'm talking to the cameraman. I'm talking to the showrunner. I'm talking to the directors. I'm talking to
Yeah.
the producers. I'm checking in with everybody to make sure everyone's mental is where it needs to be to make the best show. And if they need something and they're not getting it, fuck it. I'll give it to them. I don't give a fuck. Like, if I've got to get the coffees today, that's what we do. If
Yeah.
I gotta go and get the fucking takeout so everybody can fucking have enough blood sugar to go fucking hard in the paint, I'll do it. I don't care. Like I'm the captain of this motherfucking ship. I'm the first one in and the last one out, and let's do a great fucking show. And like there's nothing I wouldn't do. I've made like a fool of myself on a broadcast. I let E League fucking put me in a Hahachi costume. I let WSOE put fucking fireworks we got off a Native American reservation that like burnt my skin. So we could get an exploding throne effect. Like I'll do it. Like handled the fucking scorpion in the desert. I'll do it. Like if
Yeah.
I drew the line at jumping out of an airplane for one show, right? But like that's you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I just wish like people could the show lives forever, dude. You don't even get to say that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's something freeing about it too, like if somebody who's this is what I think like the division between like talent and product management is, or like tournament organizers is, right? A tournament organizer doesn't really have to explain to you why they're either not hiring you or why you're not doing the final or whatever. Like they have a vision that is their responsibility, right? So all they have to do is say, hey, our vision for this grand final is somebody else. And that's actually quite liberating. Like they're not passing judgment on you. They're not saying we don't think you're good enough to. They're just saying we're going a different direction to try and accomplish what we think currently is the best show, and that's really all you need to know. Like there's
Yeah.
something cool about that, I think. And I just for me that was super 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 important, and it what's bizarre is it was offered to Samuel and I so many times. Like you've no idea how many times I've been offered the chance to like say, okay, we're doing like, all your events this year, and then we're doing, we'll obviously let you do the grand final as everything. And we said like, no, just don't do it. Like, even if
Yeah.
you have a strong feeling that you want to do it, just don't say it to us. Like, because
Yeah.
why would you put yourself in the position, right? Why wouldn't you, if Henry and Sadokist are like, knocking it out the park and they're actually just doing a better job? Why wouldn't you want to be able to change horses in the middle of the whole race and just say, hey, we're going another direction here?
Yeah.
So I think that was that was like a big thing for me. That was like super, super, super important. And it was also something else that I didn't I knew that it was going to be impossible for me to maintain any kind of reasonable relationship with the people that I work with if they ever found out that I was operating in a different way. Like
Mm.
it would destroy any chance of like of staying friendly with someone if they find out years later that like, oh well, we never actually had a chance, like because it was all prearranged from the start. So I think that was like but I mean those it's also it's increasingly, I would say at one point it was hard to maintain because it's like it is an idealistic way to kind of look at things, and it can be harder to maintain that when you again hit the other side of the peak, right? It's easy to say I'm open minded about for grand finals. Everyone should be able to prove themselves when you kind of know that you're going to get the grand final almost anyway. It's so much harder to do when you get the other side, and that like I had a massive struggle, I would say, in my career at some point that probably lasted like many, many years, where these were like background things in my mind. Like I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out how can I stay on top of my game, but also still, but sort of battle all these things in the background. Like that's really tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people don't realize. I say it all the time. Like if the fans could just like it doesn't have to be arse licking levels, but if you could just dial your empathy up a little bit, we
I
like CS in particular, well, it would be like a much better place. But unfortunately, the general the gamers TM entitlement bleeds into everything else, and they almost treat you not like a person, but like a feature of a show or a broadcast, another knob or dial they want to fiddle with, as if it was game balance or whatever. Like I don't like this person's voice, so fuck them. They should never be allowed to work. They should never be allowed to eat. They are dog shit. And every time I see their name mentioned, I will be there to remind everybody why I think they are completely worthless as an entity. And you go, wow, like this is too much. And like it might not affect somebody like 1,000 days out of their lives, but on that 1,001st day, it just sucks to be like hated for trying to bring your
sure,
craft to people, and for the criticism to extend not beyond I don't like what you do and this is why, but you are a cunt. I fucking despise you because you're not up to this illusory standard of work in my brain. And I think like no talent ever wants to admit it, but it gets people down. It definitely does in
sure,
the industry, and you never know what people are going through. You never know why someone might have phoned in a cast or why they fell off. You don't know if they're going
yeah,
through a breakup, a divorce, they're ill, they lost a loved one. I mean, think about, and again, I won't name names because I don't want people to focus on the specifics, but I know I mean, a serious number of on-air talent these past few years that have gone through really sudden and shocking bereavements of
yep,
immediate family members. And within
yeah,
weeks, they are on a show, smiles, tits and teeth, as they say in the industry.
yeah.
And you wouldn't know that they are fucking going through this horrible time. And you know what? Like
Well,
a little attaboy from the fucking community or at a girl, like yeah, that would fucking go a long way. But it's never there.
okay, so this I have a personal story around this that I when you sort of months ago when we said let's have a conversation and we just kept postponing it forever.
Yeah,
When,
yeah,
when you said we talk about your career and stuff, I this is something that I thought would be interesting to bring up. So I had a moment like this that is so wild, like, and it's so I when I think about it now, I think like I did so many dumb things, like all in like one like long row. That's so crazy. But basically, my second kid, Nana, she was born in 19,
Mm,
and so all the way up until like she's born in she just her birthday like 2 days ago, 6th of February. So she was born 19 then, and the last sort of months of pregnancy, November, December, January into it, um, was just like super rough. Like, you have one child who's like 4 at the time. You have a mom who's kind of more or less out of it for good reason. And I'm traveling around the world, like, doing this esports thing. And I'm building a company in Skybox in the background. So whenever I'm home, I am in the office in Copenhagen, like doing meetings, talking to investors. We travel to London, we travel to Germany, we do all this stuff. Like that's like work outside of like what little I'm home. That's doing this. So I'm doing all these things. And at some point, I sort of I recognize this is going to be a really, really bad idea. Like I kind of can't just work forever right up until like the day when she's going to arrive. So I thought, okay, I have to take some time off. So I took, I think, most of December, all of January, and all of February off, basically as like I'm going to be there for my family to try and make this work. Also
nice.
because when Walter was born, I left for the Cologne major one day after he was born because
Mm,
I am an idiot.
I remember. Yeah.
So yeah, crazy times. But I learned, at least I learned something from that. And I said, I'm not gonna do that again. Like this time I'm gonna be
Green
really,
room legend Walter there getting a
yeah,
shout out.
unbelievable. But I still, to be honest, still to this day, when I think about the fact that I did that, I still think like, damn, that was really stupid. But it's worked out in the end. Um, but yeah, so I did that, and then I think there was March was like a somewhat of a dead month, I think, for random reasons.
Mm,
So now we're talking about like having 3.5 maybe months of no income. That's a lot. Like that's even if you're
mm,
working, like generally when you're working this industry and you're working off of like freelance, you're getting paid quite a lot when you are working, but then in between there's just nothing, right?
yeah.
So I realized, like I looked at our bank accounts at one point, I thought, holy shit, like we're gonna run out of money like right now. Like as in like at the end of March, we're gonna have no money to pay our bills. That's it. And then I started calling people. I said, hey, I know I've been out for a little bit, but what's the next event I can do? Like how can I get back into this? And I just kind of got met with like a really strong sort of feeling of, we kind of thought you were, kind of gone a little bit. Like we didn't really think you were, like we've started hiring other people. Like what's going on here? And that was shocking to me. Like, what did it take? Like 3 months, and I was, in the minds of a lot of people, basically gone. I had to call in a bunch of favors to like call people. Most notably for me, I called Jason Lake,
Yeah.
who's like one of the best human beings I know,
Yeah.
in
For
that
sure.
sense. I called him. I said, like, Jason, I'm actually so screwed. I need to do some kind of work for you guys over in Complexity. Can we do that? Can you pay me now? Can I invoice you for it now? Even if I haven't done it, can I do it now? And then I'll do the work later. I promise find a way to do it. I'll figure it out. And he just said yes. Like he just didn't even ask any questions. He said, like, absolutely, we'll do it. We'll fix that for you this moment.
So
Uh,
he's by the way 100% on my like people you'd take a bullet for
yeah.
list. You know what I mean?
Now, what an unbelievable thing to do, right? Like he just recognized he's like another person who's just like in a lot of trouble. So I went through like a whole week of dialing everybody, like and I, also like Jason Lake wasn't the only one. There were like a lot of industry insider people who kind of came around and said, "Okay, listen, we'll make it work. We'll fix something. We'll figure it out." And I booked like literally the rest of the year. Like I think I had like almost no time at home for like
Mm.
from then on because I had to do that. I had to do that, or we weren't going to be able to make it basically from like a financial point of view. Um, and I like hung up the phone on like a Friday, having done, and I was so relieved. I was like, "This is amazing! Like I've done all this. Like we've made it. Like we're not gonna have to sell the house or anything. Like we're gonna be good." And then my dad called me and he said, um, that his cancer had basically he'd had cancer for many many years, had now reached like a tipping point, and that he was definitely going to die within like the next 3 or 4 months or something. And I just remember thinking, like, this is mental. Like, I can't even really, I can't even come visit you like like I can be there like a couple of times, but that's it. Like, and I can't say no to these things. I cannot do it. I don't have a choice. Like any other time, I would have said, I'm postponing an event, like for obvious reasons. But this time, I just don't have that. I can't do it. So that was wild. And then luckily, in a positive way, I've thought about it a lot since, and I saw a psychologist about it and everything, like, you're supposed to do if you're a reasonable human being. Um, I I kind of so I got to see him like before the end, and we had like I think I would say like a reasonable interaction. It was good. Like it's never good, but like in retrospect, it was probably as good as it could have been. Um, and fortunately, he kind of lived his life at like 120%. So I know he didn't die with any regrets. Which if I had to say something to people, that's a really good way to live. Like it's
Yeah.
actually quite helpful to the people you're leaving behind that they don't have to worry about whether or not. So that was like a overall years later now, probably a good thing. But at the time, I didn't even think about it. Like I just went on working. Like I saw him, and then it was it. And I went to a funeral, and then I left. Like literally the next day, I was out again, like working, working, working. And I remember I was quite happy. Like overall, like I was like back doing Counter Strike. I loved doing it. It was sick. Like it was all. I didn't have any feeling of like, oh, this is so sad or there's a lot of stress. I was just so excited that we didn't have to sell a house, basically. And then a year later to the day, like literally on the day that he died, um I just had this insane feeling like I was breathing and I couldn't I couldn't get the air to stay in my lungs, or I couldn't get it deep enough down. And I thought like, what's happening? Am I having a heart attack? Like what's going on? And I talked to my sister, and she sort of randomly said like, you understand, like it's a bit weird, but it's like this is the exact day that it's happening. Like, have you thought about the fact that maybe this could be like some sort of
Mm.
anxiety or stress or something? And it became immediately obvious to me like that's what it was. So somehow I don't know how this works, but somehow my body kind of remembered that, and I in truth I had spent no time dealing with this, right? I just gone from like, having a newborn into like almost like crashing everything in terms of like, family, money, everything. And then
Mm.
to having like, the whole cancer, and then into working like full time with no stop whatsoever, never really being home and just being on the road for like, and like I'd done through all of this, and it was like such an insane situation. And it was only at that point that I was not even that I wanted to, I was forced to understand that like I need help. I have
Yeah.
to. And it's so hard, like, as anyone who's ever been through this, it's so hard to pick up the phone and call like a random number and like you find on, the internet who's like a
Yeah.
psychologist and say I was crying on the phone, like talking to these people saying like I need help. Like that was the
Yeah.
only thing that I could like really say. It's like I just need help. I need to find somebody to talk to because I'm really doing badly, like unbelievably badly. And and again, like throughout all of this, like I still had to go to events, right? Like I wasn't like, there's no such thing as saying, because not going to events makes this worse, right? All you're doing is making it worse. So that was like and it took me a long time. It wasn't like I think I went to the first psychologist like a couple of times, and I was really positively, because what I did when I spoke to her, this I think worth people to know how this works, at least in my case. I told her the entire story that I just told you, and even the act of doing that made me realize you're an absolute idiot. Like, of course you're not doing well. How could you? Like, how could you possibly do well given everything you've just said? Like, and that was the first time that I like realized, okay, well, at least I have a good reason to not be doing very well at all. And then it took like a long, long time. And it's anyone who's ever like, I didn't know what anxiety was. Once you run into anxiety, like you just realize, like, yeah, it's gonna take a while. Like, it's not gonna be something
Yeah.
you just fix in like 1 second. So yeah, like that's been, I kind of wonder. I actually don't know. I wonder what it would be like if I went back and watched some of those old VODs myself, if I can see it in my own face. I don't know how much other people realize what was sort of like, I don't know how people could know. But that's like, yeah, when you talk about stuff happening in the background, yeah, like it really does. Like, and that's one of the really brutal parts about working, in front of a camera. It just is.
I mean, first up, just a couple of things, brother. Obviously, we've talked about this
Yes.
off the show. Um, I mean, listen, the thing with your dad, like he was a fucking dynamo. You take after him in that sense.
Yeah,
It,
for better
it,
or
it
worse.
yeah, but he wouldn't have wanted you, like, fucking. Oh, I've got all this work lined up and these obligations, but I'm gonna stick around,
Yeah.
so we can fucking spend a little bit more time out of the
Yeah.
fight. He'd have fucking hated that. Um, and second of all, I think. I think there's something in there that you said that's kind of like super instructive about the paradigm, the issue baked into itself, because you said, and I've said this, working, if you don't work, it doesn't help. Working helps, but it's sort
Yeah,
of, it does and it doesn't. What it does
true.
is it it gives you a reason to propel yourself forward, but that propulsion is coming at a cost, right?
Yeah,
Like, went through it myself, so I can totally identify, exactly that mindset. I fucked up. I crashed and burned, very publicly, made a fool of myself on a podcast. I fucking was drink, I wasn't upright, but I had to work. I had to stream. I had to ride the wind of what was this new opportunity, this new potential popularity to maintain my audience, grow my community,
yeah,
have opportunities, get my work out there. And every time I was doing it, I was thinking, okay, I would get off the show, I'd get off a podcast, get off a stream, and I'd be going, like
yeah,
another one. I did it again. I did it
yeah,
again. I'd be giving myself a pep talk out loud in an empty house. Like,
yeah, yeah,
well done, Rich, well done. And then I pour a drink and take a sleeping pill, and I did that until I fucking melted.
yeah,
And because it wasn't actually, it was keeping my mind off things,
yeah.
but the body and the subconscious, they were still all on this shit.
Yes.
And one day you're just gonna crash, man.
Yeah. Yeah, you will be forced to by your own
Yeah,
mind and body. Like it's not you don't have a choice in it, which in itself is like a really it's a very unpleasant like this is just like a temperament thing for me. Like I think it's something to do with how I grew up and my experience in school. But like I have this mentality that up until I ran into this, I would say my mentality was very much one of like I can actually solve all problems myself. Like I don't really feel like I need a lot of other people to help me out with really anything.
mm,
So for me, like running into this thing of like saying, okay, I cannot solve it like this. There's absolutely no way. Like I can't do it. That was like that was really hard. Like really, like an awful thing to kind of run into. And I had an after series of realizations that I've only really made, I think, in the last year, to be honest, maybe even less than that. Of like, because even when you're like on the path to improving things, I had this meme in my brain that said, I want to fix myself so that I can come back to being the Anders that I remember from
mm.
like 2017 or 16 or something like that. Like I want to go back to being that person.
Yeah,
And I just realized at one point how much nonsense that like of course you can't go back to like you've had insane experiences, like
yeah,
wild things have happened to
yeah.
you. Why would you be able to come out on the other end of that and then say like, oh, now you're like the same? Like that doesn't make any sense. So it took me a while to kind of like realize I have to be something else. Like I have to incorporate whatever these experiences are into something new. That's
Mm,
who I am now, and that's fine. That's okay. And it's part of in some ways it's part of life. I bet if I spend more time talking to people who are 50 or 60 or 70, they'd probably be able to tell me some of this, from the start, right? But in the moment, that was hard for me. Like I felt like I don't recognize myself. I want to go back to being who I was. And it was
mm.
only when I ditched that I kind of like I was able to accept, no, why is that a thing? Like why should that happen? That it's like an illogical, thing to
Yeah.
expect at this point in time.
And also, like, you're setting yourself an unachievable goal, right?
Yes.
Like, and that's going to compound stress and all this other all these other problems. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you just brutal truth of linear time, in reality is you
Sure.
don't
Yes.
you just don't get to go back, and things will happen to you and adjacent to you that are going to change you in a very profound way, and
Yes.
and there's not really a lot you can do about it. You can't really resist the change. You sort of just have to let it wash over you, and knock off some of the rough edges. Like,
Something that helped me a little bit in some of this. I hate to say it because he's slightly lost his mind since the dear old Jordan Peterson, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. We've all seen the
yeah,
Chinese milking
it's
porn
been it's
posts.
been
It's been rough.
it's been a bit rough. But before things went truly off the rails, he had this point about like everyone kind of being just like one or two like catastrophes at the same time away from basically losing their entire lives, right? And I think
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that's a scary fact. Like all it takes is for like again the tax department to like they write you and they say they want to audit you, and at the same time you get the news of somebody you love, having cancer, and
Yeah.
like all it takes is like one or two
Landlord's
other
gonna
things.
sell the house. Wife's
Exactly,
gonna
like
leave you. Yeah.
yeah, just like three of those things in the same week. Most people cannot get up from that again, right? And
Yeah.
it happens, like it happens randomly. That's super scary. But so I think like for me, like I kind of on some level recognized that's what I am in right now. Like I am in that like all of these things happen all at the same time. Like I have to accept that like this is gonna get better, but it's gonna be like it's gonna be intense. And like I
Mm.
said, I had other experiences that were like that I was the casting thing. I was like a veteran at some point in all of this, but I was building the Skybox company at the same time. I don't know anything about building companies. Like that's a whole new thing. You're
Yeah.
arguing suddenly with business people. You are trying to like carve your way in that. You have partners, but they don't always have the same interests that you have. Like you have to debate those people too. You have to figure out what's going on. You have to find funding, so you're running out of funding all the time. Like it's a it that was a in some ways an insane thing for me, and now looking back on it, to try to start that company in the middle of many of these things. um and like that in sometimes that made things like way worse for me, right? Because like
Yeah.
whatever time I had I just didn't even have anymore because I was like, I was doing that. um but also in like I'm now like super happy about the whole thing. And we have like 16 employees or something in the company, maybe a little bit more. And like things are going super well. And it's a really, really exciting, journey.
Yeah.
But at some point through all of this, it wasn't right. It was like it was really hard.
Just quickly, because we're in this like these are the types of conversations that I just wish more people would sort of have publicly. I think they're actually there's such benefit to people like that listen to this. But yeah, it is obviously life's a bummer sometimes, guys.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask you another bummer question, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But like look, in recent times, that one of the things that's really started to annoy me has been, I've started seeing this kind of like really ungrateful and inaccurate and unnecessary over criticism of you as a commentator. And I read this on Reddit, I read it on HLTV, I see it on Twitter. And people, these new kids who've like turned up in 2019, 2020, the pandemic boom fans, they're all, you'll read comments like, wow, yeah, I don't really fuck with this Anders cat. Like, I don't like his casting. He forces hype. That's the one. Like, yeah, all casters do that. What the fuck are you talking about? Why, and things like this. And it just like, it pisses me off to read it because, like, for me, from a CS perspective, I think of you like, Al Michaels, right? If you know Al Michaels,
I don't.
he's the American commentator who did the Miracle on Ice
Oh yeah,
hockey
I know
game.
that reference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, well, yeah. He's basically like got some of the most legendary calls in sports. Like he's the guy who screamed, "Do you believe in miracles?" At that hockey game, which is the Miracle on Ice. So that's how iconic this guy is. And I think about like Inhuman Reactions and Are You Kidding Me, and how these are iconic calls. And look, I'm never going to bullshit one of my dear friends. For me, I think about if I had to think about the very peak of casting, you're super in CS, you're super close. I'll give it to Matt. I always give it to Sadakist.
Yeah.
Like,
His word stuff is amazing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He,
No
he,
question.
he, he, you were. What I love about your commentary when you have the iconic calls is you're super into it. It's so authentic. You're so enthusiastic, and it just comes out of a place like it's just like being ripped from you. What I love about Matt in the craft is his brain has tied together something from a scenario he like noticed 5-10 minutes in
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
advance, and he's got like some silent running part of his mind that's getting ready for the call. And
Yeah.
two different
And he hits the
styles.
timing for it. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's all sick. Yeah.
But I'll say this, like, you are one of the great esports greats, like Mount Rushmore, Hall of Fame, first ballot for any commentator, in my opinion. So I want to ask, when you read that now, like Does it upset you that like there's just not a bit more fucking respect and love for you, your contribution? Do you think these people are like being fair in their criticism, like they're accurate, or do you pay it no attention? Like, where are you at with
Um,
it?
yeah, man. So at one point, there was a lot of discussion in like the casting community about like how do you actually deal with with social media and feedback and all. Like some people were like, we're deleting all our apps. We're never, we're never checking them. We're only ever like tweeting, but we're never, reading any of the inbox stuff. And we're definitely never reading HLTV or anything. Um, I had, I had, my approach was very much like, I kind of want to be someone you can reach, like if you want to. Like my DMs are open. Like you probably find my email address pretty easily. I think it should be on my Twitter bio or whatever.
Mhm.
Like I kind of wanted that to be the case, and I've reconsidered that many, many, many times where I thought this is actually really hard. Because you do get people, who are like quite angry. I've
Sure.
ran a bunch of interesting experiments, I would say, throughout the years. So one thing that I noticed is people who write like really angry stuff. When I reply to them, I used to do this everywhere, like on Reddit or on HLTV. So somebody writes like, I think Anders is too fat to be on camera. He's a disgrace to the sport, or whatever it is, something like that. It could be that could be really hurtful, right? Like you're like,
Mhm.
shit, like, I probably do way too much. Like, what's going on? Like it could be that could be that's hard to read, right? But then if I write those people and I say, hey, you know what? Like, you're probably right. I probably should lose some weight. But I hope I'm working on it or something like that. Like some human response, right? Like I'm working on it, I'm trying to improve, whatever it is. Nobody has ever replied back to me and said, yeah, well, go fuck yourself anyway. Like people always reply back and say, I'm so sorry. Like I
Mm.
actually I was having like a super bad day. I love your casting, but I was just like, like I'm not saying that there are no crazy people out there, but I'm just saying like a lot of the time I think people really don't remember that there is somebody else reading it. Like they just don't. Not to excuse it, but just to say.
Okay.
And I think the other thing is,
It's very gracious of you to say that.
sure.
I'm all about fuck those
No, no,
people.
I know. Listen, I love your approach to social media. It's super entertaining for me, but I'm just saying, like, I was curious about it. I really was like,
Yeah.
what's happening here, right? So that's like on the one hand. I think another thing is like to some extent there is like a public service in just even being someone you can hate, right? Like that is like a
Mm.
thing, right? Like people's lives are you just thought about like how shit life can be, right? A lot of people watching are going through really shit things, and sometimes yelling at someone on the internet is like can be nice. So then
Yeah.
there's some public service in that. But something else that I've recognized, there's a particular kind of comment, like you mentioned one of them, which is faking hype. The other
Yeah.
one is when people say he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's a banger. Love that one.
Yeah. And these are in a way, these are genius criticisms. I came to appreciate this at one point because I realized like there's nothing I can say to refute this. I
Hmm.
can't win, and that's why it's so brilliant, right? Like you're gonna win. You've actually won every time you comment that, which is kind of sick.
Mm.
Um, but again, like for a long time, I wrote back and I said to people when they said the he doesn't understand the game thing, I wrote back and I said, hey, I obviously want to improve as a commentator. Like I want to learn. If you next time if you hear me say something where you're like it's obvious he doesn't understand the game because he just said this thing, can you clip it and send it to me, and like can you give me something. I've wrote this to 100 people at least, and nobody's, and not to say that there are no moments like that, just to say I don't think people write that as like a real point of criticism. It's just like a feeling that they can't really necessarily like formulate into anything else. And the same thing, the hype thing. Like, how am I supposed to prove that I'm excited for something? I
Yeah.
can't do that. Like, it's
How
not
do you?
possible.
Yeah. How do you
Um,
do it?
so it is kind of it is kind of genius in a way. But I really try not to get like super upset about it now. Um, but for sure, in if you catch me in the wrong moment, like if I'm already having like a really bad week or something, sure, like sometimes I'll read it and I'll think, oh man, like this is kind of a little bit obnoxious. But like I said, I want for esports to be a place where you do kind of have to earn your place. Like all, I think it would be disappointing as well if I just got hired for future events just out of like some sense of
Mm.
legacy and like we kind of owe it to Anders to do it, even though we're a little bit sick of him, but we
Yeah,
should do
yeah.
it anyway. If that was the case, that would be super disappointing, right? And I trust. a certain amount of people, like you probably one of them, and like there's some people I hope that if it ever gets to the point where people start to say, you know what, you shouldn't be doing the broadcasting thing. Like it's the casting thing. It's behind you. Like it's not the same. It's not exciting. We can like so if people start telling me that, then yeah, it's definitely worth finding something else, right? Like and not just for my own sake, but like kind of in again like in a broader respect for the game, right? Like, I don't think people should stick around just to stick around. Like I think you should do it because you really love it. Otherwise, you're kind of taking up the space from somebody else who does,
Yeah.
and giving people a worse experience.
But I also think as well, like I wish people wouldn't get bent out of shape. I mean, the good thing about broadcast work is it's pretty fucking self-regulating. Ain't nowhere
It
to
is.
hide
Yeah.
if you ain't good enough.
Yeah.
You get found out. Think how many people try to do this, right? And
Yeah.
so, listen, yeah, there's some politics at play, with
Sure.
with
Yeah.
some entities. Totally get that. But to even be in the pool, to be, politicked in the first place means you're good enough to be on the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're not there. You're over here doing a side gig, doing a smaller event,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So, I think like when people say, and I read it all the time, like just on Reddit in general, they don't seem to understand like personal preference is not like some sort of intelligent assessment of anything's quality.
Yeah.
It's like saying, oh, broccoli, I don't like the taste of broccoli, so it has no nutritional value.
Yeah.
Well, that's bullshit. So, oh, I don't like this caster, so get them off there. It's
Yeah.
like, listen, if you don't like it, I don't know, be an adult and watch the fucking show anyway. You know how many sports commentators I don't have a particular taste for, but I'm not going to turn off the game or watch it muted like
Yeah.
because they're on it.
Or
So
write them.
or send them a fucking DM on Twitter to
Sure.
their like intern or whatever. It's fucking berserk, man. So I'm glad it ain't getting on top of you too much because that would fucking suck. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think this is so one of the reasons why I started Skybox as a project was to try to. I just had this thought, and I thought it's really a bad thing for me in my life that I have like one metric by which I'm judging myself and everyone else is too, right? Like if I'm
yeah,
good at the casting, then my week is really good. If I'm having a worse week in terms of casting, then everything feels bad because that's like the
yeah,
only thing. And I thought I kind of want to do this, other project so that I have some other thing that I can like lean into. And since then, like that's kind of evolved into more thing. Now there's the whole Index project as well, which is
yeah.
also has been taking up a lot of my time.
Well,
And
let's
then
let's let's jump right in because
yeah,
listen, I'm terrified I'm gonna fucking take up all your time or you're gonna,
well, I'm fine. Like I'm not
wake up
gonna.
the kids or whatever. So, but this is the part that sort of fascinates me because people don't really talk about it enough, in my opinion. Like you built a fucking great, like I think I'd say successful project in Skybox.
Yeah,
And you're starting on something that I think is super interesting in Index.
I should
And,
I should say just real quick. I should say when people hear Skybox, they might think two different things, right? Like there's the
mm,
3D client thing that we're doing, but
yeah,
the really successful part about Skybox at the moment is what's called Skybox Edge, which is like our professional team platform. I think we're up to
mm.
like 20 teams or something using it. Like almost every team you can probably think of.
Well, come on, Anders, edge me.
Edge, yeah.
Yeah, edge me.
Um,
What's this Skybox Edge do?
so basically, we spend an enormous amount of time and resources, sort of uh, teaching. This is going to sound like a meme, but teaching like a machine learning algorithm to identify strats.
Right.
And what it means is it's a lot easier for pro teams using our tool to be able to look through a demo and find exactly like a certain strat that people are running. And obviously, once you have that, you can start to accumulate like, well, how much are they doing it, and like
Mm,
what's the success rate of all these different things, right? Because one of the big problems that you have as a team is the time that it takes to look through something. Like it's a man hour question. Like especially if you go to the game the next day against a team you don't know in an open bracket, how are you supposed to watch like 10 of their demos and take notes? It's not going to be possible, right? So the idea of like shortening down that time and giving you a menu of this is basically what a team likes to do, and then you can go and watch it. Like, you can watch the individual rounds if you want to. Like,
Yeah.
that's sort of like the broad perspective. And there's more stuff happening since then. But that's kind of like that was our starting point, like a year and a half ago or something like that. And that's been like really successful. Like, the coding team behind it is insane.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah,
have
for sure.
some really smart people that are working on it. And from a say like from a company leadership perspective, I was very, very lucky. Like, I started Skybox with a guy called Ethan, who had a lot of background in running companies and being a CEO. Knew nothing about esports when he started, but what he does now. That
Mm.
was insanely fortunate because like he's been running that company since 2017, I think.
Mm.
So yeah, crazy times.
Yeah, I mean, listen, obviously I've sat on the calls with you while you've been showing it me with fucking screen share and stuff. I
Yeah,
mean, what you've achieved in, I guess, a relatively short space of time is like really phenomenal. And how are the deals going with the tournament operators and stuff? Because I remember obviously we did have a proposed Anders Skybox feature thing at
yeah.
like an ESL event and stuff. So
I think there's still a lot of excitement for it. I think
Mhm.
it's really a lot harder than it seems. One thing is making a tool, another thing is fitting it into a broadcast. Like, a broadcast is such a crazy environment. Like, you have a show rundown where like literally every minute of the show is
Mm,
set off to something. So if you want to find like 5 minutes to do something else, especially if it's live, but even if it's pre-recorded, then you need to find like it's a lot. And I think that's like the side that we are falling a little bit behind on. I think we need to do a better job at like maybe, and we had this conversation quite a bit, maybe internally in the company we need to actually provide that to the tournaments, so that we're not saying here's a tool that you can use, but saying we actually already have like a pre-planned segment that we can show you guys how to do this and how to make it work in a reasonable fashion.
yeah.
But again, like as much as a team could use this tool to look at what an opponent is doing, an analyst or a caster could do it, right? Like, I've
Mm,
done it in some of the casts I've had, where suddenly I can go into a broadcast and I can know this team loves running this pistol round. I have I know what they're doing. I've had the stats. I can see all of the rounds immediately. Like, that's a great position to be in as a commentator, to be able to say, hey, there's a really good chance this team's gonna do this pistol round. They love it. I'll explain it before it happens, and if it happens, it's sick, and if it doesn't, that's fine. But
mhm.
like that kind of stuff, I think that if more tournament organizers sort of recognize the power of that, then you can actually massively elevate the level of prep work that analysts and casters or hosts, anyone that can like look at this and say like, oh, I actually understand what this team is doing with very little prep work. So
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I think as well, I just hope people realize that like this is something that could be, like transformative to how we do things, not just like how teams do things, but like, from a fucking broadcast perspective, imagine a broadcast being able to pull up before a game in the analysis segment, which need revamping, by the way. Everyone's really you're overworking your analysts and relying too much
yes,
on their personalities to carry your flaccid segments, right?
yeah,
What should be happening in the analysis segment is something cool. Now, just imagine being able to turn on Skybox and say, "This is algorithmically the pistol round they are likely to run in this game," and talk about it. And then you go into the game and you see immediately if the
yeah,
pistol round is different or changed in some way.
yeah.
Or your software was right, that'd be fucking awesome, right? I'd love to see that in a show.
Yeah, I mean, something that I've tried to pitch, although it's hard. It's again like it's hard to make convince somebody to put the resources aside. But one thing that I want to do is I wanted to look at rounds that a team does well, but also rounds that they do badly. And then
Mm,
I actually wanted to interview them about it beforehand. So let's say before a major, you sit down, you talk to Alexi over a Navi, and you say, "Hey, I've noticed that your B holds on Vertigo aren't working too well. Like, you're always vulnerable to this particular Molotov, and we actually have I can show the rounds right now. Is this something are you even aware of it? Do you agree that it's a problem? If it is, then what's the plan? To maybe that will be a no comment. Like, we have a plan, but we're not going to say what it. That's fine.
mm,
But then after the game, we can follow up. We can say, we knew it was a problem. Now we just saw you fail those same rounds like 3 times. Like the after interview for that is going to be so insane, right? Or they
Yeah,
fixed it and it's so sick. Like how
yeah.
exciting would that be? You're like they knew, we all knew that it was going to be a problem. It was in all the previous games, but now they fixed it. Then maybe that's why they won. Like having, but that's like it's a huge commitment to do this kind of content, right? Because you have to do it like months in advance or weeks in advance at least. Then you have to follow up throughout the show. But I think the power is if you did it for a year, then you would have like an insane level of video archiving for a lot of this stuff, right? Where
Mm.
you could go back and see like the progression of a team, like how did they get better? Well, they got better because they slowly fixed like all these things that we talked to them about over the years. So like there's stuff there. I don't think people are not doing it because they're lazy or they don't see the potential or whatever. I just think building a show is just it's a very complicated like thing. So I have some sympathy for why people are like why it's hard to fit in. And like I said, I think we can do some stuff on our end to try and like make it more of an easier meal for them in some sense. So there's something there too.
Yeah. Well, I guess appropriately, we'll end on Index. I've talked
Yes.
about it on stream a couple of times, and just for full disclosure, because I am a journalist, and even though this is a podcast, I will say I have talked to one of the executives over there, and I did do a non-paid piece of promotion around the Paris Major, where I entered into a contest on the platform to basically see which players we would have the biggest spikes in the imaginary stock of their name. But again, it was unpaid. I want to make that abundantly clear. So this isn't promotional. But the I really like the fucking platform. It's a cool idea representing essentially popularity slash fantasy slash performance, but
Yeah.
in a stock market environment is fresh as far as CS is concerned. And I think it gives people a nice little vector to kind of like talk about and participate in and support, players that they like, players that are doing well, players that might just be inexplicably popular, like JKS stock, by the way, to the fucking moon, probably,
Yeah,
like
that'd be interesting.
inexplicably popular all year round. And it just seems to be like a nice, cool thing that hasn't fallen afoul of some of the other type NFT stuff or whatever it is. So I
Yes.
just wanted to talk a little bit about that because I like it, dude. I think it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, so this is one of those things that we've had this conversation many times, but like one of the things that's been really hard for like the last 10 years
Mm.
has been like, I'm sure it's happened to you. I know it's happened to you, but I think it's happened to everyone who's like been at the forefront of Counter-Strike is you get approached by a lot of people who say, I have a lot of money to pay you for some skin gambling related thing. And
They've all come for me, brother.
yeah. And saying no to that is really hard. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I'm some sort of like super holy person that just like, for me, that's hard. Like, it's hard to turn down money. Like, it's, in those cases, like, you just think, like, wow. And what's could be even more tricky is sometimes you see how other people are kind of like, they cruise on by and they're doing fine with it. And I'm not even saying like, screw those people. I'm just saying that, like, sometimes you think, am I the idiot for not doing this? Like, what's going on here? But some part of me thought the issue is like, I don't even mind necessarily if other people do it. I just think I might be locking myself out of doing some other really cool opportunities later on that I think have more longevity and that I think serve the space better, basically, right? Um, and that was like a philosophy that I had for a long time. And then when these NXPO came around, I kind of thought, okay, maybe this could be that moment where I can jump onto something where I'm not gonna lie. Yes, I also hope to make money on it. There's no
Of
question about
course,
that.
yeah.
But it can be something that can help grow something in the scene.
Mm.
But this was like I kind of started talking to them right at the hype of like the last crypto cycle, whatever, when everyone was losing their minds. So I was like very defensive. I thought, oh no,
Yeah.
this is gonna be like more of this stuff. Um, and but they kind of said like, we're gonna fly to Copenhagen. We really want to meet you. We really want to talk to you about like how this works out.
Mm.
I don't know how, but they'd heard about me for like I think 3 or 4 different people in the industry had kind of like said you should talk to Anders about like this, and I thought okay, like so they kind of had done a little bit of research, and I found out that like the people who started this company, they have like a background in actual trading,
Yeah.
like commodities trading,
Yeah.
and all the stock stuff that people know. So they're not coming to this from like an angle where they don't. So they understand the tech side, they understand like what it means to have a stock market and all these things, right? So that in itself was kind of cool. They weren't like the crypto bro startup people. They were like,
No.
it was a little bit more. They were a little bit more serious in that sense. So I appreciated that. But I
Shirts
still
and ties types.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But but I still did a lot of research. I think I actually did. I called you back then. I said, Richard, I
Mm.
need you to look up these people. Like, I need to know. I need to know. I don't know anything about that. Like, I don't know. This is this going to be a weird scam? Like, I really try to talk to people. I try to attack it from all kind of angles. Like, I asked them a ton of questions about like, what about this and what about this and what about this? And I had many people in the community come back to me and said, "Ooh, I don't like this," or "This seems sketchy." And every time people did that, I forwarded them to, I just set up a meeting with Index. Every time I just said, "Hey, Index, I have some friends that are critical. Can you guys talk to them? Like, I don't have the answers. You guys have to talk to them."
Mm.
And slowly over time, I was like convinced that this is actually is like a reasonable project. Like it can work. Some of the things that I really appreciated was one, there are like no promises of people making like thousands or millions of dollars or anything like that. Like,
Yeah.
we're not promising people the 1,000% return anything, right? Basically, what we're saying is something like, you can. I think there's like a max account limit of like $1,500 you can even put into your account on Index. So like, that's a lot of money, but you can't sell your house and buy Index stocks. Like, that's not going to work. Um, so, and you can double that if you're doing insanely well.
Mm.
But that's the scope that we're talking about, right? And I like that. I hate the 1,000% return memes because it's so crazy, right? Like, it sets up people's expectations. I say this also as someone who was caught in the crypto thing for a good while, so I know the pain.
Yeah.
But basically, so I enjoyed that part. The other part that I really love, this is like a little bit technical, but basically the way that Index is set up in terms of like how much money Index holds to pay out people is like, it's basically overfunded in terms of paying out people. So like,
Yeah.
let's say if I have like $1,000 worth of shares in the account, right? That's not money that Index needs to hold, because it's not until I sell the shares that I get converted into money that I can then withdraw. But Index will always, they'll have the money to withdraw from the system, right? There was another version of this that happened in football where you're not trading with other users in that system, you're trading with the site. And the problem is,
Right.
then the
Yeah.
site has to custody all the money.
Yeah.
And when 1,000 people try to withdraw at the same time, the site can't. Like, it's a bank
Mm.
run, the site crashes, and that's what happened in the football version of this. So I really like the aspect that it is a real market. Like, you're trading with other people. Index, apart from I think setting the price when you IPO players, has no say in what the price is for anybody. Like, it can't mess with that. Um, so it's just like, yes, it's supply and demand based. And here, so all of this is going to, like, this is the part I actually hate about talking about this product, because the problem is this all sounds like super stock tech, stuff, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
hate that
know.
part. So just to get off that, here's why I think this could be really fun. My favorite example of this is Config after the Malta fight, right?
Yeah.
If he had been on Index, you would have had some sense of like the community's belief or lack thereof in Config as a player and as a human being, right?
Well, the community would have it to the moon. They all totally believed that twit longer.
Yeah, his 1 week recovery
Yeah.
into being a better person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and I might have said, I don't know about this, but then he got to stand in for Heroic at that one event in
Yeah.
Bahrain or something. That might have been a moment where like, how does the market react to these news things? Like, that's the thing that I think is fun, right? Because
Totally.
if you be following those things, you get like a real sense of what do people really believe, right? If I think that this is the best that Donk will ever be, then if I have shares in him beforehand, I should sell them now,
Mm.
right? If I think he's going to be even better, if that's even possible, like if I think he's going to be even better, if he's going to win the major, let's say, then I should buy shares right now. That's like a market measure we've never had, and I just think that's so much fun. It's fun to be able to have a conversation about, like, as a side conversation to the conversation about Donk. It would be cool to be able at the end of the conversation to say, what does the market actually think about this?
Yeah.
Do we have some sense of that? Is it even realistic? Like, once Dupree wins his fifth major, it might be time to sell the shares because like how much more crazy can it really get? Like, can he win a sixth? Like, if you believe that, then yeah, you should probably buy more Dupree shares, right? But if you don't, then maybe now's the time to quit. And that's a conversation that I just think is again is fun and interesting. And then the other aspect that that sort of sold it for me is the idea that the players actually get paid behind the
Yeah,
trades.
yeah.
So it
Yeah,
becomes like a
which I don't think people really understand that part of it. Like I don't think that's actually. If I say if I had a criticism of Endex's messaging, probably
sure,
that hasn't been shouted from the rooftops quite as much as they probably should have done.
yeah. And I wanted to I think hold back on some of this stuff just because I was worried that it was going to sound like I just was worried that it was going to sound weird if we were screaming about it too much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's
Um,
always it's a fine line. Yeah, yeah.
and
If
here's
you're too enthusiastic, you look like a fucking snake oil salesman.
yeah,
I
yeah,
get
that's
it.
the issue, right? Like, yeah, and that is like that is a concern for sure. Like, you end up sounding a little bit unhinged. Here's another thing that I think is cool about it. If you, not to hate on betting, I don't really necessarily hate betting to be honest, but
Mm,
if you bet $200 on a game and you lose, then you lose like 100% of your bet, right? It's all the money gone. The
yeah,
fun thing about this to some extent is that if you invest $200 into something, yeah, it can go down like, it could drop like 20, 25% or something, but it's not all or nothing, right? It's not a binary outcome where it's like either you win or you lose. It's like, no, you can hold on, you say, okay, I'm gonna hold on for another week or two or three, or some of the stocks I have been down for like 6 months straight.
yeah. I
Um,
haven't checked my account in a while. Obviously, been busy with moving house and everything. But I did really well on a Regali trade, and then
yeah,
I probably sat on it too long.
yeah,
I think it was when he shit, I can't remember when it was, but anyway, he'd been brought back as a sub. Like he had some opportunity to show what he could do, and he did really well. And everyone was
yep.
like, "Oh shit, Regali can up." It's like, right, okay, yep, to the moon on that one. So yeah, it is and that went up, but yeah, obviously I've been busy, so I probably lost it all.
Yeah,
Uh,
but even that's like, so it's like having the conversation around that, right? Like saying like, when is the chance, right? And maybe Rick Alley will prove himself to be, like even better later on. Like, who knows, right? Um, but just being able to sort of like cement your ideas and something like, there's some players I wish, like I remember the first time I saw Electronic play and he had like 71 kills on Cobblestone.
mm,
I really like, if I could, if I was trying to tell everyone like what happens every once in a while, like, if I could have bought like half stocks, I like stocks, I would have, right? And then
mm,
maybe that would have been a horrible mistake for me, right? But the ability to do that and to sort of say, hey, I was like really early on with this, like I before any of you knew who this person was, I was ready.
yeah,
I saw it happen. Like that's a fun activity, right? So yeah, so just to say, that's like another project that I've been, working on in the background. Started out being, I'd say, fairly timid about the whole thing. I feel a lot more confident about it now,
mm,
and I, it's fun to work on these things in the background. Like it's something else. It's something else for me to learn, right? Like I don't have any kind of business degree or anything, and like I'm not a coder or anything. So it's like it's a whole new world for me to kind of look into. But
yeah.
at the same time, I do love it. Yeah,
Well, just to wrap up, as I've said, I think I don't know if Index have got the budget or the inclination, but I said it on stream last night. I'll commit it to the record on this podcast. You know, I'd fucking love to do a podcast with you. Counter stocks,
oh, the
working
stocks,
title, counter stocks. I think that's better than counter stonks or you know CS stonks or something. Um,
the memes will be there.
yeah, but we will be memes. You and I, maybe Henry as well, right? Mad
Yes.
Mad Money style podcast where we talk about what's up, what's down, what trades we made, why you should make these trades, when to sell,
Yeah.
all with graphics and funny shit happening.
Technical analysis.
Mate,
Yes.
I'd fucking love to. I'd love to make that. I reckon people would love to watch that.
Yeah. I think that could be. I'm in. I'm in on that. I think that could be
Okay.
really, really interesting. We'll talk to Index. I'll send a message to Miles or whoever, and we'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll send him. We should say you brought it up before we end. We should, because you talked about the whole career thing, and obviously
Yeah, true.
now Henry and I are casting together.
Yeah, and I
Um.
didn't know if you wanted to talk about that kind of as well right at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I should because it's
Okay.
been it's like, and it ties into the criticism you talked about earlier, people saying like, oh, like lack of excitement or whatever. Like this
Mm,
is for me like the one of the really fun things about casting with Henry is like this, and I knew this the second I heard Henry like cast at like the X Games event.
mm,
Not to throw any shade at Matt, I agree with everything you said about him. But I just, for me, like Henry's like excitement for things that are happening in the game is like so I can really feel it through the screen when I was listening, right?
mm.
And for me, like that's just such a cool thing, and it's so like it,
Henry's like not far behind you again, like on the scale of
yeah,
Matt's here. Yeah, but you probably could say something outrageous, which people will take out of context. But if like Matt's God and you're Jesus, I guess that makes Henry the Holy Ghost or something, right? You know what I mean?
exactly.
So
We go, but like but yeah, like so for me, sort of ending up here now is like it's just so interesting. Like it was, and it's such a it's been a wild ride in a way. Like for a long time, I was like halfway sort of casting with Jason a little bit, and then casting with Maui for a little bit, and it was like it was just a whole roller coaster thing. And then this opportunity with Henry just kind of popped up, and like I think for me now, I'm so it's like a bunch of things that are really cool. Like it's such an easy experience when you have someone like Henry next to you who's just really excited. Like it rubs
yeah,
off on you in a particular way. So that's really cool. And then also I would say like in terms of just like Henry's approach to, professionally, like what is it like working like Henry's, I think, one of the few people that's really insisted with me that we actually meet and actually sort of like prepare for the games in terms of
mm,
like having a real conversation about like what is the actual story here? Like we have two teams playing each other. What do we think is worth highlighting? Like what does it mean if one team wins? What's in it for the other team? Like having these kind of conversations. I know that might sound like a really low bar to clear, but you'd be surprised how many
no, and look,
casting duos do none of this. Like,
people don't realize that neither. Like Henry, right? So I know they had this image, Matt and Henry, like they're the party boys, they're good looking, they go out, they love
yeah,
a drink, and all of that's true, right? Like,
sure, yes,
but Matt is like a savant. He turns up and he does his thing, and literally, he won't mind me saying this. He can do like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 casting while he's looking at something else. Like
sure, yeah, yeah,
it's fucking insane. He's like the mad artist. Henry because he comes from a background of being like an IGL, in competitively. He's about prep.
yeah,
Like he wants you to be on the same page, and he wants to know where we're going to go, and he wants to have all of the bits and pieces, and he doesn't want to get back into that world where you come along to a broadcast, you've got this insanely brilliant partner, but also he's jazz music,
yeah.
and Henry's like Oasis, you know. It's yeah, people don't give Henry his due on that one. Like,
I really think and it's probably because it's really hard to know without someone telling. Like it's also why
yeah,
I
and it's
kind
not
of want to
also
like
the thing you would never say it out loud, like, yeah, by the way,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm hardworking. But for me that was really exciting. Like I it was like a push I think I needed, in terms of somebody sort of saying, "Hey, like you've been doing this for a long time, but let's try and take it to like another level by doing this." And then also his approach very much at the start was like, sure, we have like names that sort of ring out when we announce that we're going to be casting together, but really what we're doing is building something from the ground up. Like that's really motivational to say we're not trying to come in to sort of ride off like ancient history. We're basically saying let's prove that we can do this like by building it from the
yeah.
ground up and make something cool of it. So yeah, I would say like in that sense, like that's been a really really fun experience for me, and like it's made my life like a lot better, I would say, in the last like whatever, like 6 months or whatever we've been doing it now.
It's good. It's
um
good to see Henry get his enthusiasm back as well.
yeah,
Honestly, I mean, listen, he got to the top of the mountain, in casting. He's winning awards. He's doing all the big events. He's in, the number one duo. Same thing we talked about earlier that you go
yep,
through. And then he wants another challenge. He wants to do the next thing. He does the GM thing. It was the worst time for the best opportunity.
yeah, that was
Uh,
rough.
and the pandemic fucking put limitations on a team that no other team probably in the history of being built with that kind of budget has gone through, like not being able to meet.
Yeah.
Being able to play in the same room, not really being at LAN. Very hard. And then, yeah, the community overreaction to that was disgusting. I
Yeah.
mean, like, I'm gonna just say, yeah, I've known Henry since he was a kid. Me and Henry are like brothers, obviously. Everybody knows that. But listen, if that was happening to anyone, if that was happening to someone I didn't like, I would still say the same thing. The way they've completely rewritten history around that is nonsense. And,
Yeah.
and honestly, fuck Cloud9. Cloud9
Yeah.
fucking they basically put their entire kind of future on a one tournament result coming out of the pandemic, just when nature was sort of healing a little bit. Who knows where they could have gone. They over they overcommitted the money and then turned around and said we can't justify these costs super quick in like an unbelievable fast turnaround. And then as soon as they got the opportunity to pay fucking 3 million for the Russian team, because Jack likes groove or whatever the fuck that's going on over there at a time when you weren't even supposed to be doing business with Russia, but it's okay. They had a Norwegian proxy. They go and they do that deal and they go, hey guys, we're back. And everyone goes, oh, this is brilliant. I'm like,
Yeah.
nah, actually, you handled your exit out of CS pretty fucking poorly. It's pretty suspect. And if you weren't so popular with the peanut gallery, someone would have pulled your card on that. And like Henry's had to deal with the fallout from that, and then obviously he went to do some cool tech thing. Turned out to be NFTs. I'm not. Me and him did a podcast talking about it. I'm banging on him a little bit about it, but not like the community calling him a scammer. He never fucking scammed no one. He ain't never fucking.
Yeah. Actually,
That's bullshit, man.
I sometimes, I don't know if I'm going to make things worse. I hope not. It does annoy me on behalf of Henry when people say that, and the
Yeah.
reason is I think the statistics are that something like 9 out of 10 startups die before they ever make any product, like in the normal world, right? Like it's
Mm.
just very hard to build a company no matter what, right? So you should expect that when you start something, it's going to fail. Like that's the normal way for things to go. But you don't really call failed companies scams. Like it's not like that's not
No.
like scamming is when you set out intentionally to, tank something and find a way to make money on behalf of like it's a very different thing. I I don't know if it bothers Henry anymore, but it bothers me whenever I see it. I'm like, come on,
Yeah.
guys! Like
Well,
it's
look,
like it's such a misuse of the word. Like, what are you doing?
there's no getting around the fact that NFTs were the ridiculous extraction from crypto. Like, how can we get to
Yeah, it was
the mo
super overhyped.
yeah, exactly the most
Sure.
nonsensical overhype when really we're still talking about greater fool theory. An NFT is as valuable as what some person is going to pay for it. And as we've seen now, all of the talk about blockchain, all of that stuff, ultimately NFTs are kind of fallen by the wayside as
Yeah.
as a bad idea. A bad idea. Now, listen, you might believe overall, like all of NFTs were essentially a scam, and there were definitely proselytizers, crypto bros out there talking about NFTs like they were going to retain it. All of them. What were they called? Like fucking not stoned ape, but like what were they? Great apes or
Bored
something?
ape.
Bored ape. That was it. Yeah, and the
Ridiculous.
like those people really misrepresented what their product was. Like Henry's company didn't do that. They just said they are NFTs. Like,
Yeah.
like nobody
And
at that point that participated in buying like NFTs from Henry's company was under any illusion at that point what NFTs were and are. So the
yeah.
idea that like some impressionable teenager blundered in, by the way, it's age gated as well. You have to
Yeah.
be an adult to buy these things. They blunder in and they go like, oh. Oh, this will make me a billionaire. Like said nobody ever, by the way. And people don't seem to remember that actually because of the mushroom theme, it was like promoting like psilocybin treatment for depression. They did a podcast where they were bringing on people talking about that specific aspect of mental health. They did a fundraiser where they raised money for charity. So, like, out of all of the things that you could say that is a scam, he scammed people. Like, that's not the one for me. And again, probably all of my intrinsic bias, knowing and loving Henry, might be bubbling up right now. But I don't think it is. I think actually, like there were a number, and also the people that say that all support teams that sold you NFTs.
Yeah, but I mean, I would
They
also
all
say like
support those orgs.
I remember talking to Henry. Like, obviously, we weren't casting at the time when all this was happening, but Henry and I were talking about it like a little bit, sort of, off and on when he was building this project. And like, man, the amount of effort and resources that he put into making this work is
Mhm.
like that was enough to convince me that like if you were scamming, you just wouldn't do that. Like it just wouldn't make any sense. Like if you're that like there are so many crypto scams out there that are like it's so easy to find the model for how it works, right? So
Yeah.
like if you contrast that with what they were trying to build with the whole mushroom NFT thing, like it's just like very for me very obviously at least following like a very very different pattern. Like I said, like it most companies end up going under.
Mm.
Doesn't make them scams. It just means they didn't work. Like the plan didn't work for any number of reasons. Like in this case, also the whole fucking NFT market crashed, right? So like any funding you have to continue on is automatically going to be kind of screwed. Like so, even
Mm.
if you had other plans or things you wanted to do that might have been like around the corner, they're not anymore, right? Like it's done. Like you can't run your company any longer. So yeah, like I just like that's just a like I don't think Henry tries to engage with this too much, but I notice it sometimes and I think like this is a little bit obnoxious, um but yeah, like I just thought it was worth bringing up at the end,
Yeah,
because
no,
like
for
we
real.
had the whole career thing, and it's like for me, yeah, it's like a super fun thing, and I feel like we've had good community feedback. Like people seem to be excited about it, so I just think it's yeah, for like a whole series of like crazy ups and downs. I feel like I've landed in a in a really really fortunate spot. So I'm quite happy with all of that. I'm sure I'll find more things to put my time into that I shouldn't, but that's that'll be for the for next
Yeah,
next catch
man.
up.
Yeah, listen. I'll say that right at the end as well. Like you couldn't have got a better partner in Henry. He's got me through some tough times as well. He's a guy. He's a guy who fucking knows how to, read the room and knows what people need. And he's a very caring and giving person.
Yeah.
And if you need that in your life, man, then Henry's your guy. So I'm super stoked, man. I'm stoked that you're still in it. You're still in the biz. You're still, in my opinion, you're still killing it. You're still a top tier commentator. You and Henry, I think you did get some. I did see the Reddit thread praise. I did see one of them.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, we're back in the fucking game. So, super happy. Yeah, final thoughts then to wrap up. Anything else to say?
Final thoughts.
Mm.
Man, that's one of those things should probably be prepped beforehand.
I had a dream that I inherited a talking horse last night.
Talking
There you
horse.
go. You love talking about fucking dreams.
Yeah,
What does that mean?
a talking horse.
A
I,
talking horse.
I don't know, but I know there are some people on your Discord that love that there's somebody has like a whole book
Mm.
of like dream analysis. So maybe they can
It's
bring that up.
probably Janny. She's also into
Yeah,
witch.
Johnny. Yeah, yeah, it
She,
is.
she's
It
also
is.
into witchcraft as well. So
Well, there
watch
we
out.
go.
Watch
That
out.
probably has a good
It's,
overlap.
yeah.
Actually, I
Put a
mean,
curse on you, bro.
yeah, maybe we can. I'll set this up for like our next conversation at some point. But like,
Mm.
I think one of the outside of the whole casting, like one of the big things I've had to like come to terms with in my life is just like I am just like I'm the person who's like driven by crazy ideas and starting things and building things, and that's like a really it's a weird thing to it's a I that's for me. I don't know if other people go through this. I have to learn how to be this person, and I don't think I'm like
Mm.
through learning that. But I kind of know I want to start like more crazy projects. Like the dream side of it is obviously like that's my way of like sometimes getting some of it out into the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Skybox was one of these ideas. I had the idea for Skybox in 2008, I think. Um,
It's a
some of
long
them
time
I
ago, yeah. It's
yeah,
a
it's a
long
long
time
time,
ago.
like way before I got into any kind of esports, anything.
Mm.
Um, some of the ideas I have had to see other people make, which is so hard, like personally, because it feels like I knew that this could work. Like
Yeah.
the day they announced the Vegas Sphere for me was like so devastating. Like that idea I've had for maybe 15 years before they did this. Like,
Mm.
I spent an ungodly amount of time researching how to do like curved displays. I wanted to have like actual like curved OLED displays, which is like seemed like magic technology 20 years ago. But I was like watching it getting closer and closer. It wasn't exactly what they built that I wanted to build, but it was in that area. I wanted fundamentally have like a digital globe where you can project like like geological time. You could see the continents move. You could touch it like like a giant touch screen that you could move. Like I had this whole crazy plan that I wanted to build out. Um, so like, so I would say that's like in the background of all of this casting stuff. That's been like my life has been trying to figure out like how can I try to build these ideas that I have? How can I find people to like talk into it? How can I find people with money to invest? Like this is like a whole thing. And that's just been like it's both can be very painful and like really crazy. Like it's super hard on my wife to like she has to sort of live with it half the time to like it's a bit crazy, but that's what I kind of want to. I've now, I would say in the last 2 years I've really embraced like this side of me, for better or worse. Like I'm trying to say, you know what, it's just who I am. Like I like coming up with crazy things. I would kind of want to pursue it more.
Yeah.
So that's something I probably will keep doing, and I'll probably talk more about some of the other crazy projects that I have out there. That are yet to be completely announced. But
You're in good company. William Burroughs had a dream journal, and it got published. Might have been posthumously, maybe not. But same thing. Just fucking crazy ideas, which actually many of which are like, oh yeah, that's fucking. It's actually a really good idea. So a lot to be said for it, brother. Yeah, fuck it. We'll put a pin in it there.
yeah,
We'll have to do this again sometime. I know, obviously, we were tap dancing around this one with our relative schedules for what seemed
sure.
like a fucking eternity, and I still got to get you to do the wrestling commentary,
Oh yes, yes.
which fuck our lives. But yeah, anyway, there it is, guys. It's Anders. You know him. You love him. You should love him. If you don't love him, revise that opinion. It's just objectively wrong. He's a lovable guy, a great guy. He's given everything over to the craft and the improvement of the esports space and remains positive, where even people like me, your beloved Richard Lewis, have become jaded and agents of esports destruction. So support him, support Skybox, support Endex, and any other endeavor he's attached to, for it will be a good thing. And that was the episode of the Richard Lewis Show, bumper edition here. We always love to fucking talk to each other. It's always a roller coaster. I don't know when the next episode will be. I don't know who the guest will be. I never do, but it will be a banger. So like, subscribe, whatever, and see you on the next episode.